Chapter 275. There were a total of 10 assassins this time, 3 mages, 4 archers, and 3 swordsmen. Of the 3 swordsmen, one had the strength of a swordmaster, and the other 2 were senior swordsmen. Apart from the Earth Adept mage that had been killed by Han Shuo, there was also a Space Adept mage, as well as the black-cloaked Dark Archmage. The black-cloaked mage felt a sudden chill in his heart when he saw Han Shuo appear with Pollock's head in his hand. Pollock had been right next to him, but he hadn't seen anything before being killed. This meant that the assassin's strength was definitely extraordinary. "Kill this person first," the black-cloaked mage shouted loudly and was about to chant a spell. Suddenly, the large tree next to the black-cloaked mage started to sway strangely. The branches turned into sharp arrows and shot towards him like a peacock spreading its tail. He didn't have time to react before the dozens of branches pierced him like a hedgehog, blood flowing all over his body. The black-cloaked mage's eyes were still wide open even at the moment of his death, as he looked at the tree that had suddenly turned into a murder weapon. He couldn't understand how an ordinary tree could become a murder weapon that could kill without batting an eye. The 2 senior swordsmen, dressed in black, jumped down from the roof, intending to kill Han Shuo first. The funny thing was that 3 cracks had appeared on the ground where they'd landed. The 3 who'd been about to charge towards Han Shuo were like flies that had walked into a trap. They screamed as they were swallowed by the 3 cracks. The few remaining people were extremely anxious as they watched the strange changes unfold. The assassin with the strength of a swordmaster said in a low voice, "Retreat." The 4 archers and the Space Adept mage felt as if they'd been granted amnesty when they heard the swordmaster's words. They hastily turned around to flee. "You want to leave? Heh, today is my first day on the job. I'm going to use you guys to make a contribution." Han Shuo followed them unhurriedly and said with a smile. The swordsman jumped up and stepped on a small tree next to him. Unexpectedly, the small tree suddenly came to life. A few branches wrapped around the swordsman's ankle like snakes. More branches, like the tentacles of an octopus, slowly flew up and constricted the lower half of the swordsman's body. The swordmaster's face was full of fear as he brandished the long sword in his hand, intending to chop off the soft tree trunk. However, at this moment, the old assassin Lucky, who had been hiding in the dark, approached like a ghost, already aiming at the struggling swordmaster. Han Shuo was about to attack, but when he saw Lucky go over, he knew that the swordsman wouldn't be able to escape death. He immediately turned his attention to the 4 archers and the Space Adept mage. "Brian, leave one alive." Lawrence was overjoyed. He had never expected Han Shuo to be so miraculous. Facing so many experts, Han Shuo was still so calm and unruffled. He didn't know what method he had used to toy with his opponents. Someone's killed someone. Close the door, close the door." Although this alley was remote, there were still people living in broad daylight. When they heard Han Shuo shout, they opened the windows on the side to take a look. A few civilians closed the windows and doors tightly in fear and trepidation, afraid that they would be implicated. A group of cavalry rapidly approached from afar. Han Shuo's ears were sensitive, and he had long since heard them clearly. He chuckled lowly as he looked in the direction the 4 archers had fled. His body flashed, and like a stone shot from a catapult, Han Shuo landed in the middle of the 4 archers in the blink of an eye. The demon's lair edge was like a specter, taking away 3 lives in an instant. Grabbing the remaining archer by the neck, Han Shuo lifted the archer up with one hand. The archer was only about 1.70 meters tall. His legs flailed wildly in the air as he looked at Han Shuo in terror, unable to make a complete sound. The pitiful archer's quiver had long since been thrown away, and his arms weren't as long as Han Shuo's. Although he struggled with all his might, his arms and legs couldn't reach Han Shuo. He looked extremely pathetic and laughable. "Child, be a little more obedient and you'll suffer less." Han Shuo grinned as he easily lifted the archer and walked towards Lawrence. Another Space Adept mage was suddenly shot in the back by a hidden arrow and fell from the roof after running a few steps. The archer who had shot the hidden arrow had come together with the old assassin, Lucky. Han Shuo had seen this clearly and wasn't surprised that the space mage had been killed. Who is it? Who dares commit murder in the middle of the street? After the matter was over, the cavalry in the distance arrived. The leader of the cavalry was a fully armored officer, and he shouted loudly, "You city guards really can't be counted on." Lawrence shook his head and sighed. He didn't even look at the officer and only looked at Han Shuo with appreciation. "Thank you very much, Brian. All right, this person has already fainted from being strangled. Do as you see fit. Remember that I protected you this time. The Dark Mantle will record this merit. In addition, I maintained the security of the northern part of the city and prevented a malicious assassination. The Northern Guard should also record this merit for me." Han Shuo was proud of himself. He'd made 2 contributions in one go. What a great deal. "Got it." Lawrence understood and said with a smile, There won't be any danger on the road. I'll take my leave first," Han Shuo said and walked out confidently. The officer who was supposed to stop him had already discovered Lawrence's presence. Whether it is training or casting speed, this staff can increase by 5 times. For dark mages, this magic staff is a divine artifact. There is also Ermite Cotton's understanding of dark magic. If I can completely comprehend it, my dark magic will definitely advance by leaps and bounds and reach an even higher level. These 2 items are simply priceless treasures for dark mages. Don't be so emotional. I know their value. They belong to you now. Han Shuo saw that Emily was ecstatic and hugged Emily's slender waist. "Eat this pill. It can make you everlasting youth and allow you to better study dark magic." When Emily heard the words everlasting youth, she was so excited that her heart almost stopped beating. Today, a series of good things had fallen onto her head, especially these astronomical items that were all given out by Han Shuo. This was the first time in her life that Emily was so excited. This was enough to prove her position in Han Shuo's heart. Everlasting youth, everlasting youth. The only thing Emily cared about was her age. She was a bit older than Han Shuo, and this had always been a knot in her heart. Now that there was an everlasting youth medicine, she was willing to pay any price. She muttered to herself in a daze, "Eat it. I'll help you dissolve the medicine," Han Shuo said in a low voice. He held onto Emily's slender hand and placed the rebirth pill into Emily's mouth. Without any hesitation, Emily swallowed the rebirth pill with a brilliant light in her eyes. Then, with Han Shuo's help, the bones in her body crackled as the rebirth pill slowly changed Emily's constitution. Just like Fanny, Phoebe, and the others, when Emily had the urge to go to the toilet, Han Shuo explained the side effects of the rebirth pill to her, and only then did he feel reassured and leave. At the Bust Merchant Guild, Han Shuo walked in unhindered. In a remote training field in the Merchant Guild, Phoebe was wearing a pure white warrior's outfit. Her long hair was tied into a ponytail with a thin thread, and she wielded a long sword in her hand. In the training field, Phoebe's body was as fast as lightning, and a series of afterimages were created due to her high speed. Silver sword rays shot out one after another. The sword rays were extremely sharp, and the huge rocks in the surroundings shattered with a pop-pot sound. Suddenly, Phoebe seemed to have sensed something. She raised the long sword in her hand, and a spinning cross-sword ray shot towards a small tree. With a creak sound, the small tree broke into over 100 pieces. A black light flashed by, and a shadow behind the tree trunk advanced at high speed, passing through the cross-sword rays. An enormous killing intent enveloped Phoebe, and a palpitation from the depths of her soul suddenly leapt into Phoebe's heart. In a split second, everything in the surroundings seemed to be bound by the killing intent. Phoebe suddenly felt her body stiffen, and she couldn't move at all. A deep fear arose in her heart. However, after the killing intent surged over, just as it was about to rush towards Phoebe's delicate body, it suddenly dispersed from the 2 sides of her chest. She actually didn't receive the slightest injury. When she felt her body relax and the killing intent was gone, a smiling Han Shuo appeared in front of her. "Congratulations, you actually reached the Great Sword Master realm. For you to reach the Great Sword Master realm so quickly at such a young age, it is really very rare." Han Shuo looked at Phoebe with a smile and congratulated her. Like a swallow returning to its nest, Phoebe happily threw herself into Han Shuo's embrace. A delicate fragrance mixed with the faint smell of sweat instantly filled Han Shua's mouth and nose. After Phoebe tightly hugged Han Shua, she happily said, "Thanks to your Dan. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to break through so quickly. Look, what's the difference between me and before?" Just like Fanny, Phoebe had been reborn through the rebirth pill. Her skin was so tender and delicate that it would break at the slightest touch. Her beautiful face was so soul-stirring. "You've become a lot more beautiful," Han Shua sincerely said. "Oh, I'm sweaty. I want to take a bath first." Phoebe lightly pushed Han Shua away and shyly walked towards her room. Halfway there, she suddenly stopped, and her voice couldn't be any lighter. "Come with me." Chapter 276. In a luxurious residence on the west side of Asen's city god's palace, the empire's crown prince, Charles, was currently pressing a voluptuous, beautiful woman onto the table. He was vigorously rocking her from behind. The beautiful woman's shining white buttocks were swaying, enjoying Charles's thrusts like a bitch. After a while, Charles's two legs trembled as he let out a loud cry. His entire body softened like cotton, directly lying on the beautiful woman's body as he moaned, "Darling, you're really charming. Your Highness the First Prince, please help me with my younger brother's matter." The beautiful woman didn't move as she laid there, allowing Charles to continue groping her body as she spoke in an affectionate and soft voice. "Don't worry, the entire empire will be mine in the future. These small matters naturally aren't a problem." Charles laughed lewdly as he took out a pill from his space ring, planning to swallow it and fight again. At this moment, a strange voice suddenly reverberated in the room. Charles's expression changed as he immediately withdrew the pill and quickly pulled up his pants, hurriedly saying, "I have serious matters to attend to. Quickly leave." When the beautiful woman heard this, she hurriedly pulled up her skirt that had fallen to her knees and left through the side door without another word, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. After the strange voice faded, the extremely tall and skinny Grand Duke Ashburn directly barged in. Looking at Charles, Ashburn unhappily said, "You actually still have the mood to be licentious at this time?" "I'm sorry, uncle. How's the situation?" Charles appeared very humble in front of Ashburn. He lowered his head and honestly admitted his mistake as he asked Ashburn in reply, "We failed. One of the assassins sent by Shadow Ghost was captured alive while the rest were all killed." Ashburn said in a deep voice with a gloomy face, "How could this be? We investigated very clearly beforehand. Even if those assassins couldn't kill him, they shouldn't have ended up in such a sorry state." Charles was startled, not understanding how Lawrence did it. Ashburn's mood wasn't good either. Shadow Ghost had suffered disastrous losses, and one of their assassins had been captured alive. He was also very worried as he gloomily said, "An accident occurred this time. That Brian who caused a ruckus previously seemed to have played an important role. Otherwise, the situation definitely wouldn't be this bad." "The boyfriend of the owner of the Buzzed Merchant Guild, Phoebe? How is that possible? He's just an advanced magician. What can he do with his strength?" Charles found it hard to believe. He had seen Han Shua in the Northern Rose Garden and felt that Han Shua's strength was nothing to be afraid of. This person isn't simple. After Aubrey returned from the Buzzed Merchant Guild, his body went cold and hot for a few days, and he fell seriously ill. Even with Aubrey's strength, he was still tricked. This shows that he definitely isn't that easy to deal with. This time, he came out to stir up trouble again. "It seems like we should get rid of him first so that he doesn't get in the way." Duke Ashburn paced back and forth as he thought for a moment before speaking coldly, "I'll listen to Uncle's orders." To Charles, this uncle of his was an important support. Ashburn, who held great authority, was extremely important to his throne. In addition to their familial relationship, Charles didn't dare to disobey Ashburn's words. Nodding his head, Ashburn said, "Phoebe's master, Sacred Swordmaster of Cross Corel Ascot, came looking for me a while ago. That old fellow has yet to express whether he supports Lawrence or not. It's not advisable to become enemies with him at the moment. That old fellow is rather clear about some of the experts in my hands. Because this Brian has a close relationship with Phoebe, I can't let my people take action. Shadow Ghost has suffered disastrous losses this time. I'm afraid that they won't be able to mobilize experts in a short period of time. Only you can kill him. No problem. A while ago, Great Swordmaster Leah Kane of the Brute Merchant Alliance offended the lightning sacred Magus Renaldila of the Brute Merchant Alliance. He couldn't stay in the Brute Merchant Alliance any longer and fled to our empire. It just so happens that he's relying on me. He'll arrive in 2 days. Currently, no one knows about this matter. If he takes action, this matter will definitely be settled. That madman? Ashburn was startled. He then nodded his head and laughed sinisterly. Then I'm relieved. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk in the dead of night. In the room of the master of the Buzzed Merchant Alliance, Phoebe. The sound of water splashing could be heard from the depths. Phoebe's cheerful voice was clear and melodious. Hee, is it comfortable? In a spacious bath, steam pervaded the entire room. The bath was filled with flower petals, emitting a faint fragrance. Han Shuo was wearing shorts as he lay on the edge of the bath. Phoebe had a light muslin wrapped around her entire body. She sat sideways beside Han Shuo and was currently massaging Han Shuo's muscles. Han Shuo squinted his eyes as he lazily lay there. He said disappointedly, "It's comfortable, but it's different from what I imagined. I thought you wanted me to come in with you to do something else with me." I knew you would let your imagination run wild. Massaging you like this is already good enough. I've never massaged anyone's back or waist before. You should be content. Phoebe's hair was coiled up high. A few strands of messy hair naughtily landed on her fragrant shoulders. The muslin was unable to block the spring scenery, and her fair jade-like skin revealed a natural rosy glow. Before coming here, Han Shuo had already vented on Emily's body. However, it was still unbearably swollen. It was a pity that he had promised Phoebe before coming in that he would absolutely not force himself on her. Therefore, although it was a little uncomfortable, he could only grit his teeth and endure, afraid that Phoebe would really become angry. "Brian, what exactly is that pill you gave me? How could it be so miraculous?" Bai Xiaochun asked. "If we can mass-produce it, our Buzzed Merchant Alliance will definitely be able to make a huge profit. No woman will be able to resist the temptation of such a pill. I'm afraid that anyone would buy it at a sky-high price." Like a little wife, Phoebe spoke softly as she massaged Han Shuo's shoulders, inquiring with a very businesslike mind. "Forget it. The materials used for one pill are too precious. In addition, it not only has the effect of retaining one's youth, but it can also allow you to be reborn. Whether it's your body or your spirit, all of them will be greatly improved. I spent a lot of time and collected heavenly treasures from the depths of the dark forest. It wasn't easy to refine this pill. Do you think it's that easy to obtain?" Han Shuo explained with a wry smile. Whether it was Fanny or Phoebe, they were both constantly thinking about the rebirth pill. Han Shuo had given them the rebirth pill mainly for the sake of their strength. It was a pity that these women only cared about eternal youth and didn't have much of a reaction towards increasing their strength. "If that's the case, then there's no other way," Phoebe said with disappointment and then chuckled lightly. "That's fine too. Then no one will be able to have skin as good as mine in the future, hee." Han Shuo's heart skipped a beat when he heard Phoebe's words. He thought to himself that if Phoebe were to touch Emily and Fanny, would the three women detect anything from their delicate skin? Wouldn't he be trapped in a cocoon of his own making then? Shaking his head, Han Shuo didn't want to think about this headache. He turned to the side and pulled Phoebe into his arms. Phoebe's wet body was incomparably smooth. The gauze was so thin that it was almost as if it were nothing. As soon as Han Shuo held Phoebe in his arms, his heart began to run wild. "It's just a kiss," Phoebe said with a chuckle and moved her fragrant lips to Han Shuo. But when their tongues tangled, Han Shuo couldn't suppress it anymore. But when he thought of what he had promised Phoebe before he came in, he felt a little embarrassed. Suddenly, an idea came to Han Shuo's mind. He thought of some of Chu Kanglin's demonic secret methods and secretly had an idea. When Han Shuo was kissing Phoebe's cherry lips, his big hands groped some sensitive parts of Phoebe. He tried to use some demonic flirting methods to see if they were really so magical. "Oh!" A moan that sounded like crying came out of Phoebe's mouth. The temperature of Phoebe's delicate body kept rising. Her delicate skin was flushed, and her breathing gradually became heavier. She couldn't hold back and hugged Han Shuo tightly, entangling Han Shuo like an octopus. Han Shuo had just used some secret methods, but Phoebe was so aroused, which made Han Shuo happy. He thought that the demonic methods of the old monster Chu Kanglin were really useful. While kissing Phoebe, his hands moved up and down, lingering on her back and waist. It didn't take long before Phoebe couldn't hold it in anymore. Her eyes were full of confusion, as if she had fallen into an ecstatic dream. She took the initiative to untie the veil on her body and hugged Han Shuo while panting lightly, whispering, "Brian, Brian." Feeling secretly pleased, Han Shuo smiled evilly and said, "If this goes on, I'm afraid I won't be able to control myself. Why don't we call it a day?" "You scoundrel, I knew I couldn't escape from your palm." "Forget it, forget it." Phoebe exclaimed softly and easily untied her clothes, revealing her perfect body. Her firm breasts, flat stomach, round buttocks, and slender legs were all revealed in front of Han Shuo without any concealment. After this exclamation, Phoebe took the initiative to lean towards Han Shuo. Her jade hands reached out to help Han Shuo take off his shorts and hugged Han Shuo tightly. She buried her head in Han Shuo's firm and broad chest and murmured softly, "Last time in the Valley of Sunshine, I already planned to give it to you when I discovered you were doing it. You don't have to endure it anymore in the future." Han Shuo didn't know whether to laugh or cry, nor could he explain. He didn't think that it was because of Phoebe's misunderstanding last time that she would let go of him today. It looked like he had to thank Emily for facilitating this matter. In front of a beauty, Han Shuo naturally wouldn't be polite. He turned over and pressed Phoebe down, his broad chest pressing down on Phoebe's towering breasts. His hands unceremoniously groped all over Phoebe's body and skillfully separated Phoebe's tightly clenched legs with his knees. He looked into Phoebe's eyes and said, "Why do you like me?" As Han Shuo spoke, his erect erection had already come into contact with Phoebe's moist area. Han Shuo's hands were still constantly caressing Phoebe's sensitive areas, stimulating Phoebe's desire. "I don't know. It should have started from that assassination attempt. I hated you to death at that time, but later on, I discovered that your shadow often occupied my mind. I don't know when it started, but the original hatred slowly disappeared, but your shadow couldn't be dispelled from my mind." Phoebe panted as she quickly answered. It looked like these words had long been stuck in the depths of her heart and hadn't stopped at all. From the moment he descended into this world and cultivated demonic arts, Han Shuo decided not to be shackled by anything. As for this originally cold and arrogant beauty, as he gradually came into contact with her, Han Shuo understood that he did indeed have feelings for her. Although it wasn't as infatuated as it was with Fanny, he really felt that he couldn't leave her. After Phoebe said this, Han Shuo closed his eyes and fell silent for a while. His hands unconsciously continued to release demonic arts' secret flirting skills. He didn't know how stimulating these secret flirting skills were. In addition, Phoebe was secretly in love with him. Before he took action, he heard Phoebe's loud cry. The next moment, Han Shuo felt that his lower body was wrapped by a warm and moist, wonderful place. After a long time, Han Shuo sat lazily in the bath, and Phoebe sat on Han Shuo's thick thighs like a kitten. Her hands were wrapped around Han Shuo's neck, and her head was buried in Han Shuo's chest, looking lazy and powerless. "Does it hurt?" Just now, Phoebe's performance could only be described as crazy. Feeling that it was Phoebe's first time, Han Shuo couldn't help but ask, I don't know. I felt like I had gone crazy. I didn't feel any pain at all. When I woke up, I was already like this." Phoebe was extremely bashful and said in a low voice like a mosquito. As soon as these words came out, Han Shuo was taken aback. He secretly thought that demonic arts' secret flirting skills were really overbearing. Even a woman with a firm mind like Phoebe couldn't bear it and fell into a state of madness. If ordinary women were to be played like this, wouldn't they all lose their rationality and beg to be ravaged like a slut? "I'm very sleepy and tired. I'll rest for a while first." Phoebe was indeed tired. She had taken the initiative in the previous pleasure and crazily asked for Han Shuo's grace. In addition, it was her first time, so it was inevitable that she would feel extremely tired. Well, you rest first. Han Shuo slowly picked up Phoebe and temporarily placed her on the warm edge of the bath. He sat cross-legged in the bath and ran the demonic arts. Chapter 277. Lancelot Empire, Asen City, East City, Magic Guild. The eastern part of Asen City was a gathering place for commercial organizations and various guilds. Apart from various shops, the Magic Guild, Swordsman Guild, Archer Guild, Thief Guild, and Mercenary Guild were all located in the eastern part of the city. These large and small guilds had transcendent statuses and were spread throughout the entire profound continent. Not a single country lacked one. They were an appraisal organization for all professions. Any mage or swordsman, as long as they passed the guild's test and appraisal, could obtain the corresponding rank and be recognized by any country in the entire profound continent. The Magic Guild's building was like a spire, looking like a magic tower from afar. Unlike the Swordsman Guild and the Mercenary Guild, the Magic Guild appeared deserted, with very few people entering. Mages were the most mysterious group of people on the profound continent. Their numbers naturally couldn't compare to the vast number of swordsmen and knights. Therefore, the number of mages that came to the Magic Guild to take the appraisal test was much smaller. Phoebe was too tired and had yet to wake up. After Han Shuo carried her to the bed and put her down, he went alone to the Magic Guild in the eastern part of the city at daybreak. Currently, Han Shuo possessed the mental strength of a Grand Magus, but he was still just an archmage. The necromancy magic that Clarendon grasped had been transferred to Han Shuo through the occupation of his soul. Han Shuo had grasped it after staying in the Cemetery of Death for a few days and practicing day and night. However, apart from the magic skills that Claude had grasped, the necromancy magic book that he had obtained from the Cemetery of Death also recorded the two magic spells, Plague and Soul Tremor. Plague was the same as corpse resurrection. It was the most notorious and terrifying large-scale destructive magic of necromancers for thousands of years. The reason why necromancers were so terrifying was because of the plague magic. Plague was purely a type of destructive magic. This magic didn't have a large area of effect, but what was frightening was its ability to spread quickly. As long as one person in a village or town was infected with the plague magic, unless that person was immediately burned and buried, the plague magic would follow them wherever they went. More and more people would be infected, their bodies rotting and dying. As long as a village, town, or even an empire didn't have a quick response strategy, it was very likely to become a hellish place. If it was used in conjunction with corpse resurrection magic, an archmage-level necromancy magic could resurrect all those who had died from the plague, creating a terrifying zombie army out of thin air. Han Shuo didn't plan on practicing the plague magic for the time being. After all, this magic was just too terrifying. Once the plague took form, even Han Shuo himself would have a hard time controlling it. This kind of pure destructive magic was a nightmare for any country. Once Han Shuo released this magic, he would undoubtedly become the public enemy of the continent. Therefore, after much consideration, he decided against practicing it. Soul Tremor was a type of magic that directly affected the soul. Archmage-level necromancers had a higher level of understanding of the soul and could use their mental strength to directly attack the opponent's soul. This was an attack that was impossible to defend against. Most mages had much stronger mental strength than swordsmen and knights, and could use their mental strength to defend against this kind of attack on the soul. However, swordsmen and knights of other professions had much weaker mental strength than mages. When faced with this kind of attack on the soul, they would most likely suffer greatly. Currently, what Han Shuo was practicing was Soul Tremor, but because Clarendon didn't have any experience with this magic in his memories, it was basically impossible for him to quickly grasp it. Archmage-level magic was much more profound and abstruse than before. Even if he had the incantation, it was still very difficult to use it. Only when one's understanding of the soul reached a very high level would they be able to release it. Although Han Shuo hadn't reached this level, it wouldn't stop him from becoming an archmage. May I ask, are you here to advance? When he arrived at the Magic Association, a young girl wearing a sky blue dress asked with a smile. Nodding his head, Han Shuo said with a smile, "That's right. I intend to advance to become an archmage of the necromancy major. May I ask, how do I begin? First, you must have proof that you're an adept mage, and then pay 1,000 gold coins as the examination fee. Whether you succeed or not, this fee will belong to the Magic Association. Do you agree? The girl had a friendly smile on her face as she responded politely. There was some surprise in her eyes as she looked at Han Shuo. There weren't many mages who practiced necromancy magic to begin with. She was even more surprised that such a young man had the confidence to advance to archmage necromancy. 1,000 gold coins. It looked like this magic association was very profitable. Han Shuo was slightly startled, then continued. No problem. When can we begin? Give me your certificate and the gold coins. I'll go ask the higher-ups first, then I'll tell you. The girl responded with a smile. When Han Shuo handed over the proof of his graduation from the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force, as well as the 2 bags of gold coins to the girl looked at Han Shuo's certificate with a strange expression. She looked at Han Shuo as if she'd seen a monster and said hastily, "Wait a moment, I'll be right down." As soon as she finished speaking, the girl lifted her long skirt and ran towards the top of the magic tower. Her expression was extremely strange, causing Han Shuo to be a bit surprised. The entire Magic Association had a total of 5 floors, and each floor had a large scale boundary that was brimming with dense magical elements. Although Han Shuo was a bit suspicious of the girl's behavior, he didn't release the Een demons to spy on her because of the existence of the magical boundary. After a while, a white-haired, amiable-looking old man hurriedly walked down the stairs. From the magical insignia on his chest, it could be seen that he was an Earth Grand Magus. There were a few mages behind the old man, including 2 water and thunder archmages and 4 adept mages. I'm Ares Hossein, the person in charge of the Magic Association in the Lancelot Empire. I'm fully responsible for the advancement exams for mages in the Lancelot Empire. May I ask if you intend to advance to the rank of Necromancy Archmage? The old man came over with Han Shuo's certificate, his eyes sparkling as he looked at Han Shuo. He seemed a bit surprised. Nodding his head, Han Shuo answered with certainty, "That's right. Is there a problem?" "No, no problem," Ares hurriedly said. He then looked at Han Shuo's certificate and said, "In less than 2 years, you advanced from a magic apprentice to an adept mage. This is a miracle, especially since you practice necromancy magic. If I wasn't familiar with your Dean Emma and recognized that this certificate was made by her, I would definitely think that you forged the certificate." So that's how it was. Han Shuo was astonished. He smiled faintly and said, "Then, can I begin?" Of course, of course. Our Magic Association's exam is different from your academy's. We only need to test your mental strength. Then, you can release your most powerful magic, and we will be able to determine whether you pass or not. Ares' attitude was surprisingly good as he said amiably, "Follow me to the 2nd floor. We will be taking the test there." There was a blue boundary in the center of the 2nd floor. The solid walls were engraved with all kinds of magical symbols. When they reached the 2nd floor, Ares took out a magic stone used to measure mental strength and handed it to Han Shuo, saying, "Inject your mental strength into it. We can use the data on it to determine whether or not your mental strength meets the standard." The magic stone slowly lit up as Han Shuo slowly injected his mental strength. When Han Shuo saw Ares reveal a satisfied expression, he stopped injecting his mental strength and passed the Archmage's mental strength test without any mishaps. "Not bad. Your mental strength has indeed reached the Archmage rank. Next, you can stand inside the boundary and release your most powerful necromancy magic. We can use this necromancy magic to determine whether or not you have indeed reached the Archmage rank." Ares' attitude towards Han Shuo was even more friendly as he kindly pointed at the boundary. With the extent of Han Shuo's brain development, the speed at which his mental strength condensed and released was more than 10 times that of ordinary mages. Last time at the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force, Han Shuo already understood that when other people took the mental strength test, the magic stone would light up little by little. However, because Han Shuo's brain was different from ordinary people, the speed at which his mental strength condensed was extremely fast. The magic stone lit up to its brightest in almost an instant. This time, during the test of the magic stone, Han Shuo deliberately slowed down his mental strength bit by bit. He also didn't completely release the mental strength of a grand magus in order to avoid unnecessary trouble. He still passed without any mishaps. There's no need to stand inside the boundary. Our necromancy major doesn't need to go through so much trouble. Han Shuo smiled faintly and chanted a necromancy incantation. An extremely valiant evil knight clad in pitch-black armor appeared out of thin air. It rode a warhorse with 2 fire-breathing eyes and carried an enormous bone spear. Evil knights could only be summoned by necromancers of the archmage rank. This was a publicly acknowledged fact in the necromancy major. When Han Shuo's evil knight appeared, it basically proved his archmage rank. This was more convincing than the powerful magic of other majors. Heavens, from a magic apprentice to an archmage in less than 2 years. That's too unbelievable. Oh right, why would Dean Emma be willing to let you leave the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force? Their necromancy major shouldn't have a necromancer of the archmage rank. She should be trying to keep you. When Ares saw the evil knight appear, he knew that there was nothing more to say. Han Shuo did indeed possess the strength of an archmage necromancer. Chapter 278. Then, can you help me confirm my qualifications now? Han Shuo clearly understood that the magical yuan had played an enormous role in being able to reach his current realm, and that his luck was also relatively good. No problem. Just wait a moment, and I'll help you settle everything. Ares answered straightforwardly and nodded at the archmage beside him. The archmage, wearing a loose magic robe, took Han Shuo's information to the 3rd floor. Mr. Ares, has that lord outside come again? The girl who had been waiting downstairs clattered up to the 2nd floor and asked Ares. Ares was startled and waved his hand, saying, "Let him come up." Not long after, the sinister-looking Candide walked in with a cold expression. He was a bit dazed when he saw Han Shuo standing there. Han Shuo was also dazed. He hadn't expected to run into Candide here. A light flashed in his eyes, but he immediately returned to normal, still standing there with a smile on his face. "You old thing, you've been coming to my place quite frequently recently." Ares seemed to have known Candide for a long time. He laughed heartily and said to Candide, "If there wasn't anything else, I wouldn't be bothered to come to your place." "What, is there something else?" Candide shot a glance at Ares and then looked at Han Shuo. He said with a frown, acting as if he didn't know Han Shuo at all. There's nothing else. Lancelot Empire's Babylon Academy of Magic and Force has produced yet another amazing magical genius. He advanced from a magic apprentice to an archmage in less than 2 years. This is an incredible matter. His records will become an important basis for the Magic Association. Ares excitedly looked at Han Shuo and introduced him to Candide. Candide was obviously shocked as well. He really hadn't expected that Han Shuo already possessed the strength of an archmage necromancer. He stared at Han Shuo with a burning gaze and said, "Ares, if you don't mind, I'd like to have a few words with this genius youth alone." "I don't mind, but I don't know if he'll mind." Ares shot a glance at Han Shuo, indicating that he couldn't influence Han Shuo's decision. Ares obviously didn't know about the relationship between Han Shuo and Candide. Now that he heard Candide's words, Han Shuo understood and nodded at Ares, saying, "I'll have to wait for a while anyways. Since I'm idle, I don't mind chatting with him." "All right, I'll go up first. You guys go to the 1st floor and don't let anyone else in." Ares instructed the others on the 2nd floor, then smiled at Candide. "When you're done talking with him, his Magus certificate should be ready. When the time comes, just come up and let me know. Don't be so long-winded. I know what to do." Candide seemed to be very familiar with Ares as he impatiently urged Ares. After Ares and the others had left, Candide sized up Han Shuo with a strange expression and said, "I just received news from the Valley of Sunshine that you killed Ferguson of the Church of Light. I was just about to look for you to understand the situation. I didn't expect that you would actually come here and even have the qualifications to become an archmage necromancer. You really can surprise me." During his last trip to the Valley of Sunshine, Han Shuo, who was in the Bloodlust realm, had been unable to suppress the desires in his heart and had gone on a crazy rampage. He'd killed Grand Magus Ferguson of the Church of Light on the spot and heavily injured the patriarch of the House of Minlo, Adam. This string of news had already spread throughout the Valley of Sunshine. As one of the three heavyweights of the Dark Mantle, there was no reason for Candide not to know about this matter. Han Shuo looked at Candide in silence. Since Candide already knew about this matter, Han Shuo had nothing to say. In addition, Han Shuo had long since prepared himself, knowing that Candide would definitely mention this matter. Seeing that Han Shuo was silent, Candide stared straight at Han Shuo and said in a low voice, "I don't know how you killed Ferguson. I'm afraid that even if I did it myself, I wouldn't have the confidence to kill him. Ferguson's death is one thing, but the Church of Light's influence is enormous. You'll have endless troubles in the future. In addition, I heard that you also released the Lost Magic Corpse Resurrection. I think the Calamity Church will also come looking for you. These two churches have a wide range of followers throughout the profound continent. If they want to deal with you, they have dozens of methods. How do you plan to deal with them? Different situations call for different measures. If they dare to make a move against me, I'll kill them all until they give up." Han Shuo's face was callous. Killing intent naturally surged from his body as he said in an ice-cold voice. Since Candide already knew about this matter, Han Shuo didn't need to hide it. When killing intent overflowed from his body, a character of Candide's level immediately reacted. Nodding his head, Candide said with a gloomy face, "I believe that you have considerable strength. However, the Church of Light doesn't only have one Ferguson. If they want to deal with you, they don't even need to do it themselves. They only need to exert pressure on His Majesty. I believe that His Majesty the King won't offend the Church of Light for a minor character like you." After hearing these words, Han Shuo immediately became silent. With Han Shuo's current intelligence, he naturally understood Candide's meaning very quickly. Taking a deep breath, Candide said, "You were personally brought into the Dark Mantle by me. I'm very happy that you have such great strength. In addition, you now have proof of being an archmage. I have an idea for you." The boundary he had set up before the conversation was removed. Only then did he urge, "Hurry up and give the certificate to that kid. He's very anxious." "Coming." Ares responded and walked down from upstairs with a beaming smile. He arrived in front of Han Shuo and handed over the small booklet proving his identity to Han Shuo. He said with a smile, "Congratulations, Brian. With the certification of our magic association, you are now an archmage." "Thank you," Han Shuo replied with a smile. He glanced at the gloomy Candide and cursed in his heart before going downstairs. "Congratulations, you're really amazing. You've become a rare archmage necromancer at such a young age." The girl in charge of reception said in admiration when he reached the first floor. Han Shuo flashed a radiant smile at the girl, nodded, and left the Guild of Magic. The girl blushed under Han Shuo's brilliant smile. Her heartbeat was much faster than normal. She thought to herself, "He's so tall, and so handsome and young." With a height of 1.9 meters, Han Shuo had a strange demonic aura due to his training in magical yuan. It was only natural that he would attract the attention of the opposite sex. "My first target is Colbert. He has the strength of a swordmaster and has raped and killed 7 girls. He currently lives in the outskirts of Bimson City and is the mayor of Billowtown. He has the title of Baron." Han Shuo walked out of the Magic Association and took out Candide's piece of paper. He skimmed through it and walked towards the Imperial Transportation Matrix with a cold smile. Chapter 279. Lancelot Empire. On the outskirts of Bimson City, a small town called Billow. The mayor of the small town, Colbert, was leisurely humming a tune as he basked in the sunlight. He lay lazily on the tallest and most luxurious balcony of the town, squinting his eyes as he peered at the young ladies walking back and forth in the town. Although the town wasn't large, Colbert could still earn close to a few thousand gold coins in taxes each year. With this money, Colbert could live a comfortable life. When he was in the mood, he could use force and authority to sleep with the women of the town, and no one would dare say anything to him. This was because he was a baron of the empire, the mayor of Billowtown, and a powerful swordmaster. These conditions added together made him the local tyrant of the town. Sigh. When will these days come to an end? A commoner had just returned from the mountain forest and complained in a low voice. I heard that Root's wife was raped by Colbert again. This is the 9th time this year. We should leave Billowtown as soon as possible. There's no way to live. Another commoner sighed and said helplessly, we should be careful if we leave. We'll die a terrible death if he finds out. What a sin. Excuse me, is this Billowtown? A question suddenly sounded while the two commoners were conversing in low voices. It was an extremely tall and handsome young man who asked with a brilliant smile. That's right, young man. What are you doing in Billowtown? One of the commoners asked, puzzled. Your mayor is called Colbert, right? Han Shua smiled and asked again. Nodding, the commoner's expression changed as he said in disgust, You know our mayor? What do you do? I'm looking for him for a few matters. Where does he live? Han Shua had a rough idea of what was going on when he saw that the commoner immediately revealed a disgusted expression when he heard that he was looking for Colbert. Go straight ahead. The largest and most luxurious house is where he lives. The other commoner replied. He pulled the one who had an unfriendly expression away from Han Shua and whispered, Do you want to die? Look at how tall he is. He must be a friend of that bastard Colbert. Don't get yourself into trouble. As the two of them spoke, they quickly left, looking at Han Shua with disgust and disdain. Han Shua's ears were sharp enough to hear everything. He thought to himself, This Colbert is truly devoid of conscience. Even after becoming the mayor of this town, he probably hasn't stopped doing bad things. He quickly walked to the largest house and said to the guard in front of the door, I request to see Mayor Corbett. Who are you? The guard in front of the door frowned as he looked at Han Shua and replied. The three demons circled around the entire house. Han Shua observed the entire situation and said with a smile, I heard that Mayor Corbett is a powerful swordsman. This time, I have come specially to challenge him. Please help me report this. The mayor will not be interested in you. You should leave as soon as possible. The guard replied bluntly. He had no intention of reporting at all. Taking a step forward, Han Shua punched out, and the door suddenly shattered into pieces. He shouted at the top of his lungs, Colbert, you piece of trash. As a swordsman, do you not dare to accept my challenge? Brat, are you purposely causing trouble? The two guards in front of the door were immediately shocked. They drew their swords and were about to make a move. Slap. Slap. The two guards didn't even see it clearly before they were slapped a few steps back by Han Shua. Han Shua looked at the two guards who were covering their faces with their hands and said leisurely with a smile that wasn't a smile, You two better not seek death. Han Shua shouted at the top of his lungs, his voice echoing throughout half of Billowtown. When the villagers heard that someone had come to challenge Colbert, they all stopped whatever they were doing and came over to watch, no matter what they were doing. Colbert, who had been squinting his eyes and looking around, obviously heard Han Shua shout. He shouted angrily from the balcony of a tall building. Where did this brat come from? How dare he come to my Billowtown to cause trouble? Following Colbert's shout, a dozen or so militiamen walked out of his house. Colbert, who was wearing a set of shiny silver armor, walked out of the broken door with a cold expression. What are you looking at? You damned commoners, get lost. After Colbert walked out of the door, he first glared at some of the surrounding civilians and cursed. He then glared at Han Shua and said, Brat, are you purposely here to cause trouble? Baron Colbert had quite a reputation in his early years. You have the strength of a swordsman. I also practice swordsmanship. This time, I passed by Billowtown and would like to ask for guidance from Lord Baron. I wonder if Lord Baron has the guts to accept? Han Shua smiled as he looked at Colbert. Colbert glared at Han Shua and said angrily, Brat who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. You actually dare to challenge me? You are indeed tired of living. I accept your challenge, but don't blame me if you die. Of course. Han Shua readily agreed. All of you, get lost. Watch how I kill him. Colbert waved his hand, and the surrounding militiamen dispersed. Colbert took out a shiny long sword and took a deep breath, suddenly calming down. Young man, I'll let you attack first. Colbert calmly looked at Han Shuo as he got into a fighting stance. Very well. Han Shuo didn't delay. He calmly walked towards Colbert with his bare fists and punched out in front of Colbert. Colbert was a bit startled when he saw that Han Shuo didn't draw his sword. But when Han Shuo punched out and didn't see any traces of fighting aura, Colbert was even more shocked. He felt baffled and raised his sword to stab at Han Shuo's fist with a sneer. Hehe, you're courting death. Han Shuo still had the time to mock Colbert. He concentrated his magical yuan, and a brilliant red light shot out from his fist. The milky white fighting aura that shot out from Colbert's sword was instantly drowned and scattered by the red light. A loud clang rang out as the punch landed on Colbert's sword hilt. Scorching heat suddenly erupted, and Colbert let out a shrill scream as he was sent flying along with his sword, spitting out mouthfuls of blood. Oh, my gosh, that demon is seriously injured. Great, I hope he dies this time. Then we'll be free. It'd be best if he dies immediately. Otherwise, our Billow town will never have a day of peace. Some of the villagers watching from afar had joyful expressions on their faces when they saw that Colbert had been seriously injured in a single blow. They started discussing in low voices. I have no grudge against you. Why are you looking for me? Blood flowed from Colbert's mouth. He had been gravely injured in a single strike. He immediately understood that Han Shuo's strength was much higher than his, but he didn't know how he had offended Han Shuo. Hehe, because you deserve to die. Han Shuo had a cold smile on his face as he slowly walked towards Colbert, saying, I'm Brian, you're the first. Bang! Colbert couldn't resist the punch at all. His entire body was punched in the head, and blood flowed out from all 7 of his orifices. I killed him fair and square in the middle of the challenge. You all saw it. Han Shuo spread his hands towards the militia and made an unintentional gesture. He then walked out of Billow Town under their shocked, doubtful, and fearful gazes. As long as the opponent accepted the challenge, the Empire wouldn't pursue the matter if he was killed. Candide had even instructed him to take care of the aftermath, so Han Shuo wasn't worried at all. Second target, Water Archmage Deborah of Bimson City. 3 years ago, he killed a family of 18 people in a magic shop because of a magic staff. He handled the matter cleanly and didn't leave any traces behind, successfully evading the punishment of the Empire's laws. Oh, that's him. Han Shuo took out the piece of paper that Candide had given him and saw the records with a glance. Candide had put in a lot of effort and placed all the targets close to each other to facilitate Han Shuo's actions. 2 hours later, Count Chapman Dean's house in Bimson City. Han Shuo, dressed in mage attire, appeared gracefully at Count Chapman Dean's house with a white bone staff in his hand. He smiled at the guard, saying, I'm looking for Water Archmage Deborah. Come in. When the guard saw Han Shuo's mage attire and the white bone staff in his hand, he didn't dare treat him carelessly. He respectfully called for Han Shuo to enter. When they arrived at a spacious courtyard, the guard said, Please wait a moment. I'll go inform Lord Deborah. After a while, a slightly plump, short woman in her 40s walked out with a frown. She wore a luxurious magic robe and had an azure space ring on her hand. She looked suspiciously at Han Shuo and said, Who are you? I don't think I know you. Nodding, Han Shuo said with a smile, Of course. Although this is our first time meeting, I've heard of your great name for a long time. This time, I wanted to consult you on some magical knowledge. I hope you can give me some pointers. When Deborah heard Han Shuo's words, she waved her hand and said impatiently, I don't have time for you. And here I was wondering who it was. Leave while it's still early. Don't make me angry, you damned brat. Glancing at the guard, Deborah reprimanded, Next time, ask clearly who you are before bringing you in. Don't think that I know mages. I don't have time for this kind of immature brat. As she spoke, Deborah ignored Han Shuo's existence and went straight back into the house, intending to continue fiddling with a few new magic potions. Ugly old hag, are you afraid to accept my challenge? Or do you think that you can't be looked at for long because of your ugliness? Still wearing a smile on his face, Han Shuo repeated his old tricks and used malicious words to provoke her. Sure enough, when Deborah heard Han Shuo's malicious words, she immediately turned around furiously and glowered at Han Shuo. Smiling coldly, she said, "All right, I accept your challenge and send you on your way." A dim light flashed and a dark blue magic staff appeared in her hand. As she chanted a spell, 3 5-meter-tall watermen appeared out of thin air and rushed towards Han Shuo. 5 ice awls formed as the watermen approached. The sharp ice awls carried a glaring cold light and stabbed diagonally towards Han Shuo from the roof. Interesting. Han Shuo let out a strange laugh and shook the white bone staff in his hand. He quickly chanted a spell, and a white bone shield suddenly appeared beside him. The 5 ice awls that appeared a step later were actually a step faster than the watermen and directly hit the white bone shield. The huge impact fiercely collided with the white bone shield, causing ice shards to scatter and cracks to appear on the white bone shield. Unhurriedly retreating from the white bone shield's range, the white bone staff in Han Shuo's hand flashed once again. 2 hate warriors, 1 evil knight, a dozen zombies, 20 skeletal warriors, and a group of flying gargoyles appeared out of thin air one after another, filling the courtyard. An evil knight riding on a fire-breathing warhorse thrust out a huge bone spear in his hand. A 5-meter-tall waterman in front of him was directly pierced through by the bone spear. The evil knight lifted the skeletal warhorse and spat out a stream of raging flames from the warhorse's mouth. The waterman that was riddled with holes squeaked and emitted smoke as it dissipated. You're actually a necromancer." Bora was taken aback and shouted in a somewhat panicked manner. In a battle between mages of the same rank, necromancers were at a disadvantage against light mages. In addition to this, necromancers could rely on their powerful summon creatures to hold a huge advantage against mages of other elements. If it wasn't for the disappearance of the Necromancer Codex, necromancers wouldn't be as few as they were now. When the canopy of necromancy covered the sky, the speed and strength of the dark creatures greatly increased under the cover of the canopy of necromancy. The remaining 2 watermen were directly drowned by the large number of dark creatures as they charged through the cover of the canopy of necromancy. In particular, the evil knight that Han Shuo had summoned took the lead and charged directly towards Water Archmage Deborah with a terrifying force. The gargoyles circling in the sky followed closely behind. Under the cover of the canopy of necromancy, their shadows flickered and flashed, appearing so nimble and strange. Han Shuo didn't use the Little Skull, the Earth Elite Zombie, or the Wood Elite Zombie. He also didn't use any demonic arts. Relying purely on necromancy magic, Han Shuo completely held the upper hand. In a battle between archmages of the same rank, with the mental strength of a Grand Magus, no one was a match for Han Shuo other than light archmages. Even if his opponent was a light archmage, the 3 dark creatures immune to light magic, the Little Skull, the Earth Elite Zombie, and the Wood Elite Zombie could still be easily killed by Han Shuo. Therefore, in a battle of magic of the same rank, even if he didn't use demonic arts, Han Shuo was still invincible. Chapter 280. Damn it! Bora cursed in a low voice. She obviously felt that something was wrong and hastily retreated into the room. Her short and fat body was actually quite nimble as she planned to obstruct the dark creature's charge inside the room. The high-level water magic, Ice Spell, was released. A white mist enshrouded the room as a sparkling and translucent ice wall sealed the door. The ice wall emitted a cold white mist under the illumination of the sunlight. The evil knight rode on his skeletal warhorse and raised a bone spur that was even larger than his body. He charged towards the ice wall, raising his bone spur high and fiercely thrusting it at the ice wall. Clang! Surprisingly, this ice wall formed by the frost spell actually had a tough defense. When the huge bone spikes hit the ice wall, they made a huge impact. The ice wall was only pierced by the sharp bone spikes, and the ice wall's defense did not collapse in one fell swoop. Ice blade slash! A loud cry came from Bora's mouth from inside the room. The cold wind howled and snow fluttered in the air. One after another, ice blades spun and shot towards the dark creatures in the courtyard. When the lower-level skeletal warriors were hit by the ice blades, Their weak skeletons shattered one after another. Even the spiraling gargoyles fell one after another under the Ice Blade's attacks. However, the higher-level zombie warriors and hate warriors still stood tall even after being cut by the Ice Blades. They walked step by step towards the room Bora was in and began to attack the ice wall together with the evil knight. Under the cover of the canopy of necromancy, Han Shuo wore a cold smile as he stood proudly in the middle of the courtyard. He leisurely watched the dark creatures attack Bora and inwardly experienced the most appropriate way to use necromancy magic. Clang! Finally, the ice wall shattered under the impact of the evil knight's huge bone spur. Soon after, the evil knight charged into Bora's room along with his skeletal warhorse. The two hate warriors and several zombie warriors also entered and occupied the room's windows in an instant. "I surrender! I surrender!" Inside, Bora turned pale with fright and suddenly cried out involuntarily. When the evil knight broke through the ice wall's obstruction and rushed into the room with his undead army, Bora knew that it would be difficult for her to salvage the situation. Bora felt an instinctive fear when she was stared at by the evil knight's malevolent and merciless eyes. She immediately screamed to save her life. So. A dozen or so bone spears shot in through the window, two of which directly attacked Bora's back. Before Bora could react, they directly penetrated her short and stout body and carried her towards the evil knight. The evil knight raised his huge bone spear high up. When the bone spear fell, Bora's head flew high up into the air. A mouthful of warm blood sprinkled down and fell into the still smoking potion bottle. The potion bottle was splashed by the warm blood and suddenly burst open. Murder! Murder! When the guard who had brought Han Shuo in heard the mournful scream, he understood that Bora must have been killed. Losing his head out of fear, he screamed as he rushed to the back of the courtyard. Through the spying of the demons, Han Shuo noticed that there was a group of people in the distance who were swiftly heading over. This time, his target was only Bora. Han Shuo didn't waste any time. When Bora died, he immediately recalled his necromancy and the mental strength he used to maintain the canopy of necromancy. He then used the levitation spell to leave the courtyard. For 5 days in a row, Han Shuo used the transportation matrix to travel back and forth between the various cities of the Empire to challenge experts. Not only was he victorious in every battle, but he also killed his opponents on the spot. His fierce reputation quickly spread throughout the Lancelot Empire. Under Candide's deliberate embellishment, Han Shuo's identity was slowly recognized by some of the experts of the Empire. Many nobles had heard of this young expert's deeds and expressed great interest in him. Lancelot Empire's Imperial Palace. In a luxurious hall that was heavily guarded, His Majesty the Empire, King Uhtred Lancelot, was wearing a loose robe, sitting on the throne, waiting for something. Uhtred was almost 60 years old. Due to his excessive debauchery in his youth, his body was growing weaker and weaker. Although his frame was large, he appeared somewhat emaciated. Although his hair and skin had been treated with a special magic potion, they still appeared jet black and glossy. Unfortunately, his complexion was still not good. "Your Majesty, Lord Candide has arrived." Suddenly, a guard walked in from outside and said softly. This guard was wearing a shining armor, appearing calm and callous. His entire body had the calm bearing of a top expert. From the insignia on his armor, it could be seen that he was a powerful sky rider. "Let him in," Uhtred indifferently ordered when he heard that Candide had arrived. After a while, Candide walked in with a gloomy face. He opened his mouth and said softly, "Your subject Candide greets your Majesty. Sit. I heard that you have a kid under your command who has been very dazzling these past 2 days. What's going on?" Uhtred glanced at Candide and asked indifferently, "He's called Brian. I was the one who introduced him to the Dark Mantle. This kid's strength is extraordinary and his mind is calm. He's helped the Dark Mantle accomplish several major things not long after joining. Oh, even Ermite Cotton's notebook was brought back from the Dark Forest by him. He's a very rare talent." Candide was still incomparably respectful after sitting down as he opened his mouth to explain, "So he's called Brian. Heh, interesting. Interesting. I remember that Red Archbishop Koss of the Church of Light just sent someone over yesterday to ask for Brian. I didn't expect to hear news of him today. Candide, oh Candide, isn't this a bit too much of a coincidence? Uhtred's voice sounded very cheerful, as if he was talking to a friend about old times. Candide was startled and hurriedly explained, "Please forgive me, Your Majesty. This matter was arranged by me with the goal of eradicating some factors that are detrimental to the stability of the country. Brian's strength is extraordinary. Not only has he passed the Magus examination of the Mage Association, he's also grasped a miraculous martial technique. He's a very rare talent. Our country really needs young experts like him." Uhtred snorted coldly and looked at Candide. "Candide, do you think it's worth it for me to become enemies with the Church of Light for this kid? Your subject thinks it's worth it. Brian is only 18 years old this year. He entered the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force a little over a year ago. In less than 2 years, he went from a magic apprentice to a necromancy archmage. In addition, his martial technique is also very outstanding. This kind of talent's future potential is limitless. It's only because he practices necromancy magic and grasps some knowledge that's detrimental to the Church of Light that the Church of Light has deliberately targeted him. In the Valley of Sunshine, there was a Light Grand Magus named Ferguson who was killed by Brian, ultimately incurring the wrath of the Church of Light. To be able to kill a Light Grand Magus is sufficient proof of his strength. In addition, the most important thing is that he's still young and has unlimited prospects for development. Your subject believes that such a talent cannot be let go. Even if it means offending the Church of Light, it's still worth it." Candide respectfully replied. A light flashed in Uhtred's eyes when he heard Candide's words. He straightened his body slightly and stared at Candide, saying, "In less than 2 years, he became an archmage necromancer from a magic apprentice and was even able to kill a Light Grand Magus. Candide, are you sure this information is true?" "Your Majesty, you also know that my wife is the Dean of the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. I can confirm that this information is absolutely true. Originally, I also suspected that his strength wasn't enough to kill a Light Grand Magus. That's why I issued the order to challenge some notorious experts. However, according to my information, he indeed has this kind of strength. The most difficult thing is that such a genius has a clean background and has a very good sense of belonging to the Empire. He's also willing to work for the Empire. In the future, I believe that his accomplishments will certainly be even greater. Perhaps he can become a figure like Corel Ascot." "Oh, right. Brian is also the boyfriend of Sacred Swordmaster Corel Ascot's most beloved female disciple, Phoebe." Candide continued, "Oh, you're saying that he has some relationship with Corel Ascot?" Uhtred was startled and asked Candide in astonishment. "Correct. Not only that, he's also a good friend of His Highness Lawrence. You also know that His Highness Lawrence is studying some war strategies at the Knight Academy and is also Corel Ascot's disciple. Due to his relationship with Phoebe and Brian's good relationship, Brian's contribution in exposing Bob Asher's plot in Valence City was the greatest." Candide saw Uhtred's startled expression and once again struck while the iron was hot. Uhtred couldn't help but turn silent after hearing Candide's words. He thought for a while and then said, "So it's like this. From what you've said, it seems that this Brian is a bit interesting. Oh, I heard that great swordmaster Leah Kane of the Brute Merchant Alliance has arrived at Asen City and has consecutively defeated 3 experts of the same level from our empire. He's quite arrogant and proud of himself. Since you said that this Brian is very powerful, then let him challenge Leah Kane. If he can defeat Leah Kane, then it will prove that he's truly a young genius. That way, not only will I be willing to offend the Church of Light for him, I'll also immediately give him a noble title." "Humph. This crazy swordsman Leah Kane has always had a vile reputation. He only fled to our Lancelot Empire because he offended Sacred Magus Reynold Dyla in Brute. Such a despicable escapee actually dares to be so impudent. He's truly courting death." Your subject understands. Candide was immediately startled when he heard that Uhtred wanted Han Shua to challenge Leah Kane. After a moment of silence, he sighed inwardly and could only helplessly agree. Chapter 281. Han Shuo had been very busy these past few days. He had used transportation matrices to travel through more than half of the Lancelot Empire. 3 archmages, 4 swordsmen, and 1 great swordmaster had all been killed by Han Shuo in the name of challenges. In the beginning, the challenges could be considered successful. This was because Han Shuo's age was too deceptive. His opponents often thought that Han Shuo was nothing to be afraid of and would angrily accept the challenge after being provoked by Han Shuo's malicious words. However, as time went on, Han Shuo's repeated successes spread far and wide. Many experts began to make connections with the identities of those who were killed and began to plot against him. In the end, there were still 3 experts on the list who had suddenly disappeared without a trace. Even the Dark Mantle couldn't find them with all their might. Once Han Shuo arrived in a city, all the experts in the city would be panic-stricken. No matter if they had done anything shameful or not, they were all afraid that Han Shuo would come knocking on their door to challenge them. Thus, they all disappeared in the name of traveling. These people were also helpless. After all, those who had died in Han Shuo's hands in the past few days were all experts. If they didn't accept Han Shuo's challenge, it would greatly affect their reputation. But if they accepted the challenge, they might lose their lives. They had no choice but to find an excuse to hide. When a great swordmaster died in Han Shuo's hands, the young expert Brian's infamy reached its peak. The experts on the list all disappeared one by one. Under Candid's notice, they could only return to Asen City to await further orders. Lord Candide, it's not that I didn't try my best. The 3 people on the list have disappeared without a trace. It looks like we can only wait until you find them. In a small tavern in the northern part of the city, Han Shuo and Candide were in a private room. It was Han Shuo who spoke first. You've done very well. His Majesty has already heard of your deeds. Let's ignore those 3 for now. There's a matter that's giving me a headache. If you can complete this matter, His Majesty will protect you and bestow upon you the title of nobility. Candide frowned as he took a sip of tea from the teacup in his hand. Oh, what's the matter? Han Shuo asked in a daze. Lia Kane of the Brute Merchant Alliance also has the strength of a great swordmaster. This person is known as the Mad Swordsman. His character is vile and his character is cruel, but he just so happens to have extraordinary strength. Currently, he has arrived at our Asen City. In the past few days, he has challenged 3 great swordmasters of Asen City and won all of them. After winning, he still spoke rudely, which has caused His Majesty to be extremely disgusted. His Majesty wants you to challenge Lia Kane. As long as you can defeat Lia Kane, His Majesty will protect you regardless of the pressure from the Church of Light and give you a noble title. However, Lia Kane's strength is extraordinary. He already possessed the strength of a great swordmaster 10 years ago. According to the Dark Mantle's information, this Lia Kane is very close to the first prince, His Highness Charles. Because of your relationship with Lawrence, I'm afraid that if you can't beat him, you might lose your life. Candide seemed to be really worried about Han Shuo as he spoke with some worry. Where does this Lia Kane person currently live? Han Shuo was calm and unafraid as he asked Candide with a smile. In the garden house in the northern part of the city. The garden house is the property of the first prince, Charles. Others might not know, but the Dark Mantle naturally knows. It was also because of the garden house that we guessed that he is related to the first prince. What, do you plan to challenge Lia Kane? Both of them are great swordmasters, but the difference in strength between someone who has just entered the realm and someone who has been in this realm for 10 years is extremely large. Moreover, Lia Kane is known as the Mad Swordsman and is extremely difficult to deal with. Candide cried out in surprise. Don't worry, I'll take care of him. Han Shuo drank a mouthful of tea and directly stood up. He said with a smile, to be honest, I'm almost addicted to the challenges I've been facing recently. Han Shuo had been running all over the place these past few days and had challenged a number of experts. He felt that his strength was on the verge of a breakthrough. The Bloodlust realm required one to quickly progress through slaughter, especially when fighting against experts. It was even faster to improve in the Bloodlust realm. After 7 or 8 battles in a row, Han Shuo had challenged archmages and swordmasters, all of whom were experts with some reputation. The last person he challenged was a great swordmaster, which gave Han Shuo a great sense of crisis. It was also through that battle that Han Shuo felt that his bloodthirsty realm was showing signs of breaking through. At this point, Han Shuo definitely didn't need to use necromancy magic, or the Little Skull's Earth Elite Zombie, or Wood Elite Zombie. With just his Bloodlust Realm demonic arts, he could directly confront a great swordmaster. If he didn't use his advantage in magic, Han Shuo's strength in the Bloodlust realm was equal to that of a great swordmaster. Liu Kang might be a bit more tyrannical than an average great swordmaster. Perhaps Han Shuo in the Bloodlust realm would encounter some difficulties, but if Han Shuo used the Little Skull Earth and would elite zombies, Han Shuo believed that he would be able to successfully kill Liu Kang. Therefore, Han Shuo didn't mind Candid's worries at all. Be careful, this person is extremely dangerous. He's famous in the Brute Merchant Alliance for being difficult to deal with, so don't lower your guard. Candide was still worried as he watched Han Shuo walk towards the door. Understood, I'll go first. Han Shuo responded and walked outside. Brian. As soon as he walked out of the tavern, Emily's voice came from a carriage at the corner of the street. Chester, dressed as a coachman, had a cautious expression as he waved at Han Shuo. The Dark Mantle's intelligence network was everywhere. Add to that the relationship between Emily and Candide, and it wouldn't be difficult for her to find Han Shuo. Han Shuo also understood that Emily would definitely come to find him, so he wasn't surprised at all when he heard Emily's voice. Looking left and right, Han Shuo suddenly discovered that there was another carriage parked in the distance. The knights in front of the carriage were all familiar faces. The curtain of the carriage was lifted, revealing Lawrence's face. At this moment, Lawrence was looking at Han Shuo with an excited expression, as if he had a lot to say to him. Han Shuo first walked towards Emily and said, "Wait for me for a moment." As soon as he finished speaking, Han Shuo quickly walked in front of Lawrence's carriage and exclaimed in a low voice, "Why are you here?" "Hehe, I accidentally discovered Madame Emily's carriage today. Seeing that she was hurrying over here, my heart was moved and I followed her. I didn't think that I would actually find you." Lawrence let out a strange chuckle and said to Han Shuo. Han Shuo understood that Lawrence might know about his relationship with Emily. He couldn't help but roll his eyes at Lawrence and said, "All right, what did you call me here for?" "Haha, I heard that you've been continuously challenging experts recently. You're quite famous now. I didn't think that you brat would stop hiding your abilities and truly start showing your talent. That's for the best. I've been to the palace twice in the past few days, and His Majesty asked a few things about you. He seems to be very interested in you. This is a very good sign." Lawrence appeared to be very high-spirited as he spoke with a smile. "Of course I'm paying attention. His Majesty wants me to challenge Liu Kang. Am I not planning to get rid of him?" Han Shuo said indifferently. Lawrence was shocked when he heard these words. Then, he became ecstatic and said, "Liu Kang is first Prince Charles's man. I can confirm this through my channels. Brian, do you have the confidence to get rid of him? What do you think?" Han Shuo looked at Lawrence with a smile that wasn't quite a smile and asked in reply, "Of course I do. You're very mysterious. I believe in you. How about this? Since you want to challenge Liu Kang, I'll help you and exaggerate this matter. As long as you can defeat Liu Kang, your notoriety can be corrected. Hehe, after all, Liu Kang is a member of the Brute Merchant Alliance. No one in our country will like him." Lawrence said with a sinister smile, "Do as you see fit. If there's nothing else, I'll look for you after I get rid of Liu Kang." Han Shuo said, It's fine. Go to your thing." Lawrence looked in Emily's direction and said with a sly smile. From Lawrence's expression and words, Han Shuo understood that he should already know about his relationship with Emily. This was all because Han Shuo and Emily were hiding behind a fake mountain at their family's banquet last time. Later on, the operation in Valence City made him even more certain of this matter. However, with Han Shuo's current relationship with Lawrence, Han Shuo naturally believed that Lawrence would keep his mouth shut. After all, if this matter was exposed, it wouldn't benefit Lawrence at all. "All right, I'll be going first." Han Shuo responded and turned to walk in Emily's direction. "Let's go." Han Shuo arrived at Chester's place and gave him some instructions before entering Emily's carriage. "Oh, Brian, It's too magical. That pill is too magical. As soon as Han Shuo entered the carriage, Emily suddenly threw herself into Han Shuo's arms and hugged Han Shuo tightly. She took the initiative to offer her fragrant lips, appearing to be extremely emotional. Chester's expression was the same as usual. He pretended not to have heard anything and started the carriage with a serious expression, slowly driving it into the depths of the street. After Chester's carriage left, Candide gazed at the direction of the departing carriage from within the shadows of a nearby corner. He muttered, "I was wondering why Emily would help him so much. So that's the reason. This kid is quite bold in his lust. As expected, he's hooked up with Emily. Damn it, he's actually a playboy." Chapter 282. In the garden house in the northern part of the city, the garden house was filled with palm trees and was brimming with the scent of spring. The unique courtyard was surrounded by fragrant flowers and plants. Several maids carefully shuttled back and forth between the flowers, trimming and watering the fragrant flowers. On a soft lawn, eldest Prince Charles was squinting his eyes as he talked with a boorish-looking man with two crisscrossing scars on his neck. The man was about 1.75 meters tall, but his hands and feet were large and he was incomparably sturdy. His eyes shone with the light of a savage beast. "Mr. Leah, you shouldn't have challenged 3 great swordmasters as soon as you arrived in Asen City. After all, you came from the Brute Merchant Alliance. Our country is an extremely xenophobic one. If my father knew that you were one of my people, it might affect his impression of me." Eldest Prince Charles frowned in displeasure. He was very angry at Leah Kane's unauthorized actions. Leah Kane grinned and said arrogantly, "Your Highness, although I've pledged my allegiance to you in Lancelot Empire this time, I don't necessarily have to listen to everything you say. First of all, I'm a swordsman. Since I've come to Lancelot Empire, according to my habit, I must exchange pointers with the local experts. Otherwise, how can I improve my swordsmanship? Damn, what a boorish fellow. If you have the guts, go challenge Sacred Swordmaster Karel Ascot. I'll see how you die." Charles inwardly cursed and his expression became even more unsightly. He said to Leah Kane, "Let's forget about this matter. I hope you'll tell me before you do anything next time. Do you still remember that Brian I told you about last time? He's the one I wanted you to help me kill?" Leah Kane was startled. He thought for a moment and nodded. "Oh, he's the kid you mentioned who practices a special martial art? Why? Has he appeared in Asen City? Do you want me to go kill him today?" Shaking his head with a wry smile, eldest Prince Charles said, "The situation has changed. Brian's reputation has soared after he challenged several experts in the past few days since he left Asen City. I don't know who released the news that Brian returned to Asen City with the goal of challenging you. As soon as this news came out, all the nobles and experts in Asen City began to pay attention to it. You've been cultivating in the garden house all this time, so you might not know, but now even my father seems to be interested in this matter. It's not very appropriate for you to secretly kill Brian at this time. I think it's better for you to take the initiative, directly challenge him, and then kill him. This way, no one can say anything. What do you think?" "No, I've decided not to. Who do you think I, Leah Kane, am? How can I lower myself to challenge a brat who's still wet behind his ears? Himph, if he's interested in challenging me, then I'll gladly accept the challenge. But I absolutely can't go to his door and challenge an unknown brat." Leah Kane resolutely refused without the slightest leeway. Charles, who was sitting in his chair, fiercely grabbed the armrest and cursed inwardly. He thought, if you don't have a bit of strength, then damn it, I'll immediately have someone kill you just because of your attitude. You're just a brute, yet you dare to contradict me repeatedly? All right then, many people are paying attention to this matter. There are even some people loitering outside the garden house these past 2 days. I'm guessing they're waiting for Brian to come and challenge you. It's not convenient for me to come and find you, so be careful. If Brian comes, you must kill him immediately to avoid future troubles." Charles was a bit annoyed. He stood up from his chair and said to Leah Kane, "Don't worry, he'll die without a doubt if he dares to come." Humph. Youngsters these days really don't know the difference between life and death to actually be so arrogant and conceited. I'll let him understand just how strong his seniors are. Leah Kane snorted coldly. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Under the influence of those with ulterior motives, this news quickly spread to every corner of Asen City. At first, only a few of Asen City's experts and nobles received this news, but when someone elevated this matter to the glory of the nation, even the commoners heard of this news. In this way, Han Shua's birth and origins were gradually torn apart and revealed to the world. A young slave, relying on his astonishing talent, had been accepted into the Empire's best Babylon Academy of Magic and Force as an exception. In less than 2 years, he had advanced from a lowly magic apprentice to a rare archmage necromancer, and was even equipped with a miraculous martial technique. All of this news added together confirmed Han Shua's name as a genius. While Asen City was abuzz with discussion about this matter, a few large merchant guilds had already begun to secretly place their bets. The crazy gamblers expressed their intense attention to this matter. Among them, the matter of the buzzed merchant guild betting a huge sum of money to oppose Cameron's merchant alliance was something that no one knew about. Late at night, Asen City's west side. Of the 4 major blocks, the west side of the city was the dirtiest and poorest. This could be said to be a gathering place for commoners. Trash was everywhere on the streets, and flies and bedbugs were everywhere. A few scantily clad beggars were curled up in a dark corner, dozing off. A stench lingered throughout the year. However, no matter how poor a place was, the moonlight wouldn't favor one over another. The cool and bright moonlight shone down, elongating the shadows of Han Shua's party longer and longer. The lights in the surroundings flickered, and a few suppressed sobs could be faintly heard coming from the simple and crude houses. I really didn't want to come to this place. Chester's expression was heavy as he sighed. Although Emily stayed in the carriage, her black eyebrows were deeply furrowed. Her tender, white, and smooth skin was as bright and clean as white jade. She wore a jeweled ornament on her head and a well-fitting silk dress on her body. She seemed out of place in the environment of the west side of the city. Emily had seen Chester's information and knew that he was born a commoner. In his early years, before he entered the Dark Mantle, he had lived in the west side of the city for a period of time. However, Chester obviously didn't miss those days. Thinking about it, no one would miss such a place. All right, let's leave as soon as we finish our business. Every country has its rich and poor. This has never changed since time immemorial. We have no way to change all of this. Han Shua sat in the carriage and lightly shouted through the curtain. Behind the carriage that Han Shua sat in, a small troop of 100 knights followed at a moderate pace. In the narrow streets, the troop of 100 knights formed a long line. Hurry up, we don't have much time. Don't complain, Emily also urged. Chester didn't say anything else. He skillfully drove the carriage along the quiet streets. After passing through this street, he headed straight for the dirtiest and most remote area of the west side of the city. After a while, Chester slowly stopped the carriage in a place where sewage was everywhere and the stench assailed his nostrils. He turned around and said, "Lady Emily, those dilapidated buildings in front of us are the place mentioned in the information." Inside the carriage, Emily changed into a black robe that covered her entire body in front of Han Shua, concealing her identity as a high-ranking member of the Dark Mantle. She slowly got off the carriage and looked ahead. She said to Han Shua, "According to the information, it should be those buildings in front of us. The enemy is from the Angela Empire. Their leader is called Yoland, and he seems to be a skyrider." Nodding his head, Han Shua released 3 demons and slowly snuck inside. He walked towards the troop of 100 knights at the back and instructed an officer, "Don't act rashly and alert them. Spread out and surround all those buildings. Approach them slowly. If anyone tries to rush out, capture them alive if possible. If that doesn't work, kill them on the spot. No matter what, don't let a single one escape." "Yes," the officer replied and turned around to make a gesture to the knights behind him. The knights gradually spread out and surrounded the buildings from a distance. In the center of these knights, there were a few mages who were originally surrounded. Due to the knights' dispersal, they gradually revealed themselves. The mages of the Northern Guard's magic department were mostly intermediate or advanced mages. there was only one thunder archmage. Before they came to carry out the mission, they had received Boris's orders to listen to Han Shua's commands. Originally, these people were still a bit rebellious. However, after they learned of Han Shua's identity from Boris, they all became well-behaved. Not a single one of them dared to disobey orders. In the span of a few days, Han Shua had traveled across more than half of the Lancelot Empire and challenged several notorious experts. In the end, all of them were killed by Han Shua on the spot. This kind of cruel and merciless method cemented Han Shua's fierce reputation, causing all of these people to become well-behaved. A person who could kill several experts wasn't someone they could afford to offend. Not to mention that he had received full authority from the highest commander of the Northern Guard, Boris. They wouldn't be foolish enough to provoke Han Shua. All right, find your positions. It's best if you stay in the middle of the knights. Listen to my orders later and attack with your strongest magic. Han Shua swept his gaze over the Thunder Archmage and instructed. Understood, Lord Brian. The Thunder Archmage nodded respectfully. He wasn't angry that Han Shua had stolen his position as the leader of the magic department. Chapter 283. Before Han Shua joined the Northern Guard, this lightning archmage named Korea was the leader of the Northern Guard's magic department. However, due to Han Shua's appearance, he had no choice but to listen to Han Shua's orders. Originally, Korea was a bit unwilling, but after Boris spoke to him privately, he immediately understood that Han Shua had only joined the Northern Guard to accumulate military merits. He knew that the magic department of the Northern Guard was only a springboard for Han Shua. With this, not only did he not have any complaints, but he also purposely tried to curry favor with Han Shua, hoping that when Han Shua soared in the future, he would be able to help him. Be careful. There are over 20 people on the other side, and all of them are quite strong. Han Shua instructed the people behind him, then returned to Emily's side and reminded her softly. Understood. What do you think we should do? Emily nodded and asked for Han Shua's opinion. When the 100 knights surround the area, immediately use magic to destroy all the obstacles. Capture these 20 or so experts if possible, or kill them all. As long as we can find the blueprint, this mission will be considered complete. Han Shua thought for a moment and said lowly, Let's do as you say. The Northern Guard seems to trust you more. You need to command them well so they don't mess up. In front of Han Shua, Emily was already used to him being the leader and said obediently, All right then. Pay attention to Yoland. Don't let him escape. Han Shua replied as his body slowly floated into the air. Han Shua was like a ghost as his body quickly weaved through the knights and mages. Relying on the omnidirectional vision of the three demons, Han Shua continuously issued orders to the knights around him, telling them to abandon their horses and hide in different directions. Over 100 knights separated by 150 meters, slowly surrounding the opposite side. Standing proudly in the air, Han Shua calmly commanded the knights and mages of the Northern Guard, arranging suitable people in every corner. Everyone softened their voices and slowly approached the dirty, dilapidated building. Gradually, the 150-meter distance shrank as the encirclement shrank. When the two sides were only 50 meters apart, Han Shua suddenly waved his hand at Korea and the others. When Korea and the others saw Han Shua's movements, they immediately started chanting magic spells with solemn expressions. Sir, we've been surrounded. I've heard strange sounds. A wind mage said anxiously to the tanned, tall, and muscular Yoland, who was riding a violent tattoo beast. How is this possible? Yoland, who was resting, abruptly sat up amidst a pile of weeds and hurriedly looked out the window. His expression changed drastically as he bellowed, Everyone, gather! Find an opportunity to break out. In this room, a group of more than 20 people calmly stood up when they heard this. One by one, they drew their swords and sabers and prepared to break out of this place. As the leader, Yoland remained calm in the face of such a predicament. His space ring glowed faintly as he took out the blueprint that he had painstakingly obtained and carefully placed it in a crack in the wall. Yoland said in a low voice, The brothers that have come this time are not afraid of death. I will place the blueprint in that crack in the wall. If any of you are able to leave alive, you can wait until Austin City is no longer on guard and come back to take the blueprint back to the Empire. Do you understand? Don't worry, sir. We know what to do. The Wind Magician replied solemnly. The other people in the room all had resolute expressions on their faces. They were already prepared to sacrifice themselves. Suddenly, 5 bolts of lightning struck down from the sky. The zigzagging lightning illuminated the pitch-black night sky. A few walls of fire appeared around the room. The scorching heat assaulted them head-on. The earth began to rumble and tremble as sharp spikes abruptly appeared. Yoland and the others in the room understood that the attack had begun. They all jumped out from the windows and doors one by one. Under the attacks of the lightning, fire, snakes, and earth spikes, they scattered and began to break out of the encirclement. Kill! Han Shua's cold voice resounded throughout the night sky. Kalia's lightning bolts crashed down, bombarding the houses and causing them to explode one by one. 2 assassins who had rushed out were struck by a bolt of lightning, their bodies convulsing and collapsing on the spot. The 100 knights of the Northern Guard were all elites of the army, and all of them possessed the strength of a novice or intermediate knight. Under Han Shua's orders, they all lined up in an orderly fashion to block off the road. As soon as they discovered anyone charging in their direction, they would immediately and unceremoniously intercept them. Send 3 knights from the north to stop them. Korea, send 4 experts from the Ministry of Magic to attack the south. Yoland is in the west. He's a Sky Knight. Those in the west, be careful. Using the vision of the 3 demons, Han Shua calmly commanded. He was always able to accurately estimate the strength and number of the enemy and send out the corresponding experts to intercept the assassins. Under Han Shua's commands, Emily and Chester slowly approached the direction of Yoland's charge. As a thief, Chester wasn't strong in direct combat. Thus, he stayed with the knights in that direction to intercept them. Emily stood behind the knights, ready to attack with dark magic at any time. Damn it! How did the enemy know our movements so well? Yoland had everyone spread out. At the beginning, they had targeted some of the weaker areas and used their strongest forces to launch a surprise attack. Unfortunately, before they could even get close, the originally sparsely populated areas suddenly became heavily guarded, and the attackers ended up badly battered and bleeding. Under Han Shua's orders, the mages had released magic in unclear directions. However, they were often able to beat Yoland's men into a sorry state, severely injuring or killing those who had wanted to take advantage of the situation to launch a sneak attack in the dark. I didn't see anyone release the Sky's Eye. I don't know how the enemy can grasp our movements so clearly. The Wind Mage appeared to be extremely anxious and frantic as he quickly said in a panicked voice, "Everyone, if you think that you can easily escape after committing a crime in the Lancelot Empire, I think you are gravely mistaken. Heh, we all know who you are. As long as you put down your weapons, surrender, and reveal your identities to us, we can spare your lives and wait for the negotiators of your empire to come." Han Shua gave out a series of orders and spoke with a smile. Through the observation of the demons, Han Shua had a clear grasp of their movements. Then, he had arranged reasonable experts to intercept them according to their strength. He had successfully killed more than 20 assassins, and only 13 were left. Due to Han Shua's reasonable commands, the Northern Guard only had 4 lightly injured and 1 heavily injured from the enemy's counterattack. Other than that, no one had died. However, what responded to Han Shua was an even more fearless charge. Not a single one of these Angela Empire assassins showed the slightest hesitation. After Han Shua's words, they fiercely tried to charge out of the encirclement. From their reactions and strength, Han Shua could deduce that they were all death-sworn. They had probably never thought of living since they entered the Lancelot Empire. It was basically unrealistic to capture these kinds of people alive. Therefore, after hesitating for a moment, Han Shua suddenly said, "Everyone, don't hold back. Kill them all. Brothers, do your best to charge out. Even if you can't, at least drag a few down with you." Yoland suddenly shouted when he heard Han Shua's merciless command. "You have no chance." Emily's voice was cold. Her eyes under the black robe stared at Yoland and said, There were more than 10 technicians in the factory. They were all powerless civilians. They were all brutally killed. You all deserve to die today. Haha, you're not from our empire. If you die, then so be it. Yoland laughed wildly. He raised his double-edged broadsword and charged straight at Emily while riding on the tattoo beast he was riding. He laughed wildly and said, "Woman, do you dare to stop me alone? You're courting death." Before Emily could chant an incantation, Han Shua arrived at lightning speed. A thick killing intent spread out in an instant. The Demon's Lair edge radiated red light in all directions. The blood-red sword aura swallowed and spat. Han Shua gripped the Demon's Lair edge and slashed it down at Yoland from above. Yoland, who'd been charging towards Emily, hadn't thought that Han Shua would fly over and attack from above. Although he had the strength of a Sky Knight, it was still a bit strenuous for him to face such a sudden attack. He'd been holding his broadsword horizontally, but now he hurriedly raised it to meet the Demon's Lair edge above his head. Clang! Sparks flew in all directions, and an obvious crack appeared on Yoland's broadsword. His shoulder trembled, and he groaned. The violent patterned beast beneath him couldn't withstand the gravity, and its 4 short legs broke with a creak sound. The violent patterned beast fell to the ground, and its wolf-like head continuously spat out blood. Haha, even if you kill me, don't even think about getting the blueprints. All the technicians have been killed. Without the blueprints, you still won't be able to make the chariot. Yoland first looked at the tattoo beast beneath him with grief, then laughed wildly with a malevolent expression. He had no way to attack Han Shua, who was standing proudly in the air and could only quickly run towards Emily. Isn't it just hiding in a crack in the wall? How hard can it be to find? Han Shua said disdainfully. When Yoland's face changed greatly, Han Shua didn't bother with Yoland and rushed towards the room they'd been hiding in like lightning. Chapter 284. Yoland, who had planned to attack Emily, felt his heart skip a beat when he heard that Han Shua had revealed his secret. Just as he was about to turn around and return to the room to destroy the blueprint, a few crossbow bolts whizzed towards Yoland. Emily waved the magic staff in her hand, and a sharp Grim Reaper scythe, shining with the light of death, slashed towards Yoland's body. "Stop him! Don't let him get the blueprint!" Yoland's sharp voice rang out as he hurriedly raised his broadsword and slammed it towards the Grim Reaper scythe. The Angela Empire assassins who had been trying to break out of the encirclement all gave up on trying to break out of the encirclement when they heard Yoland's shout. They all turned around and charged towards Han Shua. Unfortunately, the difference in strength between them and Han Shua was too great. Their speed was also incomparable. Han Shua used the art of the demonic ninth heavens to fly to the room like a bolt of lightning. He took out the blueprint from the hollowed-out corner of the wall, and only then did the assassins run in front of him. "Courting death," Han Shua shouted coldly. He lifted the Demon's Lair edge and landed on the ground, walking towards the Angela Empire assassins who were charging towards him in a frenzy. As the mystical glacial spellfire was unleashed, Han Shua's Demon's Lair edge burst out with a brilliant purple and red light. The purple and red light sparkled like a rainbow on the blade of the Demon's Lair edge, quickly forming thin and long flames. The purple and red flames flickered beautifully, jumping out of the Demon's Lair edge's blade and stretching into twisted lines of fire, entangling into 2 magic webs, one purple and one red. The few assassins from the Angela Empire who were charging towards Han Shua only had one thought in their minds: to destroy Han Shua. Facing the magic webs of the scorching and freezing elements, each of them unleashed their strongest fighting chi to form swords, attempting to tear the 2 webs apart. However, Han Shua's strength had greatly improved, and his mastery of the mystical glacial spellfire had reached a whole new level. The leaping magic webs twisted and swayed in the air, as if they were fishing in the ocean. The sword light pierced the magic webs, but they simply hit nothing but air, piercing through the beautiful lines of fire. "Not good, retreat quickly." Yoland, who had dodged the death god's scythe in the distance, charged towards Han Shua as well. When he saw that his subordinate's sword rays were ineffective against the weave, He immediately understood that this unknown web was not something that could be torn apart by sword rays. Thus, he could not help but shout a warning. However, the strange swaying webs in the air were extremely fast. Before those people could react, 2 large webs had already been cast down and trapped them all. The crimson net enveloped the 3 assassins. The bodies of the 3 assassins that were touched by the line of fire felt as if they were pressed down by a red-hot iron brand. Thick smoke suddenly rose from their bodies. Amidst the shrill screams, their flesh was charred black, and they slowly fell to the ground. The other 4 assassins who were covered by the purple weave immediately froze up, their bodies shivering like ice sculptures as they maintained their positions of either dodging or attacking. "I'll die with you." Yoland finally arrived in front of Han Shuo. When he saw his brothers turn into charred ice sculptures under the cover of the weave, he roared and raised his broadsword, charging towards Han Shuo without a care for his own safety. "Heh, I'm afraid you won't have the chance." Han Shuo raised the demon's lair edge, a calm smile on his face as he said these words and flew towards Yoland. Yoland had a sinister expression on his face as he brandished his greatsword. He laughed wildly when he saw Han Shuo rapidly approaching, and was about to throw caution to the wind and fight to the death with Han Shuo when a pair of hands suddenly reached out from the ground beneath his feet and tightly grabbed onto his feet. "Shoot him to death." Han Shuo, who had been close to Yoland, suddenly froze in midair as he shouted at the dozen or so Northern Army knights with crossbows in their hands. Yoland, who was unable to move, could only watch as Han Shuo stood 5 meters in front of him in the air. When he raised his broadsword and chopped down at the 2 large hands that were grabbing onto his legs, the 2 large hands retracted into the ground. He then felt an unforgettable pain from the bottom of his feet. 2 bone spikes had pierced deep into his feet, sinking deep into his knees. Amidst the screams of a pig being slaughtered, several crossbow bolts flew over and pierced through Yoland's body. Yoland's resentment and killing intent before his death transformed into an aura that was difficult to see with the naked eye and was absorbed by Han Shuo, who stood calmly in front of him. Including Yoland, the group of 20 or so assassins from the Angela Empire had all lost their lives. None of the resentment and killing intent of the dead escaped Han Shuo's absorption. Instead, it made Han Shuo's magical yuan even more complete, and the feeling that he was about to break through became stronger and stronger. Han Shuo walked in front of the 4 Angela assassins who were like ice sculptures and shot out 4 beams of black light that landed on the 4 assassins. For crunching sounds rang out one after another, and the originally frozen assassins fell limply to the ground. Han Shuo said to the knight leader of the Northern Army, "These 4 aren't dead yet. Guard them closely and don't let them commit suicide. This will be an explanation to His Majesty." "Don't worry, Sir Brian. We know what to do." The leader readily agreed and ordered the few soldiers behind him, "You guys, tie up these 4 assassins and cover their mouths with cloth. Don't let them have the chance to bite their tongues and commit suicide." Under the leader's orders, the dozen or so soldiers quickly came over and took out special tools to tie people up from their leather bags. From their well-practiced movements and rich equipment, Han Shuo was sure that these 4 assassins would have a hard time even if they wanted to commit suicide. Once they were brought to the Northern Army's detention center and given an anesthetic, they would be so weak that they wouldn't even have the strength to bite their tongues. Under torture, they might actually be able to get some information out of them. Without looking at the 4 assassins, Han Shuo walked to Emily's side and handed the blueprint to Emily. "Take it. This mission is considered complete. It doesn't matter if I give the blueprint to the Northern Army. If you take the blueprint, the Northern Army will be able to answer to His Majesty." Emily and Han Shuo naturally wouldn't stand on ceremony. Since Emily couldn't reveal her identity, she didn't say anything to Han Shuo. She nodded and turned around, landing on the carriage that Chester was driving. She entered the carriage and left with Chester, quickly disappearing. "Sir Brian, it's all thanks to you that we were able to successfully capture the assassins from the Angela Empire and find their hidden blueprint. If Count Boris puts in a few good words for you in front of His Majesty, Sir Brian's contribution will be enough for you to be made a noble." Thunder Archmage Korea walked in front of Han Shuo and sincerely congratulated him. He appeared to be even happier than Han Shuo. Heh, the credit belongs to everyone. Without everyone's cooperation, I wouldn't have been able to capture them by myself. You guys go back and report. I still have some matters to attend to, so I'll be leaving for a while. Han Shuo glanced at Korea and said with a smile, All right, Sir Brian, please leave first. We'll take care of the aftermath. Korea said with a respectful expression. Nodding, Han Shuo didn't continue to stay here. He left in another direction and quickly disappeared from the dirty and chaotic slums of the western part of the city. In the dead of night, Han Shuo silently appeared in the buzzed merchant guild and walked towards Phoebe's room with great familiarity. There's no need to think about it. I believe that Brian will definitely win. Perhaps our guild's crisis can be turned around with this gamble. Take out all the funds we can and fiercely fight against Cameron and the others. In Phoebe's living room, the capable and astute Phoebe said resolutely, Little Phoebe, do you want to reconsider this matter? I know your relationship with Brian. Although his strength isn't bad, Leah Kane has been famous for many years and is even stronger. Everyone agrees that Leah Kane has a higher chance of winning. This gamble is no small matter. If we lose, I'm afraid that the Buzzed Merchant Guild will directly collapse. Buzzed Merchant Guild's elder Andrew said with some worry as he leaned on his walking stick. Andrew was an elder of the Buzzed Merchant Guild. Before Phoebe had taken control, he had taken care of Phoebe. Therefore, Phoebe still cared a lot about Andrew's opinion. However, after becoming the master of the Buzzed Merchant Guild, Phoebe had truly taken control of the guild. During this period of time, the Buzzed Merchant Guild had indeed made great progress in Phoebe's hands. Andrew had also seen this and understood that Phoebe wasn't an emotional person. If it wasn't for Leah Kane's fame, perhaps he wouldn't be so worried. Grandpa Andrew, Brian's strength is even more powerful than you can imagine. In addition, we've already been forced into such a state by Cameron. Right now, Cameron's Merchant Guild is doing everything they can to suppress us. Our guild is having a hard time moving forward. Even without this competition, our Buzzed Merchant Guild will still be slowly weakened by their bullying. But if we win this time, then we can reverse the situation. Those merchant guilds that originally cooperated with Cameron will shed all pretenses of cordiality because of the huge losses. At that time, we, who have a large amount of capital, will be able to truly control the situation. Phoebe calmly analyzed and explained to Andrew, AI, since you've said so, then let's do it. I hope that Brian won't disappoint us. Otherwise, the Buzzed Merchant Guild will really be finished. Andrew thought for a while and finally nodded in agreement with Phoebe's suggestion. This also meant that the crisis that the Buzzed Merchant Guild was facing was extremely great. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken this kind of gamble to save the guild. Chapter 285. After Andrew's group left, Phoebe sat there with a frown on her face, deep in thought. It seemed that the Buzzed Merchant Guild was facing a great crisis this time. Otherwise, with Phoebe's cautious nature, she probably wouldn't have used this kind of gambling method to fight. Han Shuo slowly walked in without a sound and looked at Phoebe with bright eyes when he arrived at the door. After a while, Phoebe was suddenly startled. She raised her head and saw that the person was Han Shuo. She revealed a serene smile and happily said, You're back? Don't worry, I will kill Leah Kane with my sword tomorrow. There's no doubt about that. Han Shuo smiled as he walked towards Phoebe. When he was in front of Phoebe, he reached out and smoothed out the worry lines between Phoebe's eyebrows. He said softly, I believe you. This time, our Buzzed Merchant Guild has put out 700,000 gold coins. As long as you kill Leah Kane, Cameron will have to compensate us 5 times the amount according to the current odds. No matter how rich Cameron is, he won't be able to support it. This way, our Buzzed Merchant Guild will have an enormous amount of capital. Cameron and the others will naturally not be in danger. Phoebe enjoyed Han Shuo's gentleness very much. She lightly leaned on Han Shuo's chest and said softly, All right, you should rest early. I'll cultivate here tonight. Tomorrow, I'll go to the garden house to challenge Leah Kane and get rid of this trouble as soon as possible. Han Shuo patted Phoebe's fragrant shoulder and urged Phoebe, After hearing Han Shua's words, Phoebe nodded meekly and smiled. Don't worry, I'll definitely go with you tomorrow and watch you kill Leah Kane with my own eyes. I know you'll definitely win. After saying this, Phoebe didn't stay here any longer. She walked into the room with a light smile and said softly, Wait until you win, then accompany me for a good chat. After Phoebe left, Han Shua sat down cross-legged in the hall and silently circulated his magical yuan. He slowly recovered his spirit and adjusted his condition. Inside Han Shua's body, the demon infant seemed to be in a bloody whirlpool. Drops of blood essence were sparkling and translucent like rubies, appearing like red crystals. The blood essence converged into a whirlpool, nourishing the demon infant in the center. Streaks of crimson blood energy surrounded it. This was the killing intent of the bloodlust realm. It was also a kind of nourishment for the demon infant. The demon infant that looked exactly like Han Shua was only the size of a fist, but there was a black dot between its eyebrows. This was where Han Shua's life weapon, the Demon's Lair Edge, resided. The Demon's Lair Edge that was connected to Han Shua's life had absorbed a large amount of killing intent during this period of time. It had hidden itself in Han Shua's body and became a black dot between the demon infant's eyebrows. Through this method, the connection between Han Shua and the Demon's Lair Edge became more complete. The demon infant and the Demon's Lair Edge could also replenish and absorb energy from each other. Once the Demon's Lair Edge successfully evolved into a vile soul, the connection between the Demon's Lair Edge and the Demon's Lair Edge would become even closer. As long as Han Shua willed it, it wouldn't be impossible for him to take someone's head from 1,000 miles away. During this period of time, the bloodlust realm Han Shua had fought all over the place and killed many experts. The killing intent and resentment of the experts that died in Han Shua's hands were all absorbed by Han Shua, aiding Han Shua's progress bit by bit. Especially during the trip to the Forbidden Land, where Han Shua had devoured a large amount of killing intent, both Han Shua and the Demon's Lair Edge had made great progress. In the bloodlust realm, Han Shua could already gradually control his nature. When the killing intent accumulated to a certain degree, it would change from quantitative to qualitative. At that time, he would be able to break through to the separate demon realm, and his strength would increase by another step. At that time, not only could he continue to cultivate a higher level of secret demonic arts, but he could also separate his consciousness from his body and obtain some unfathomable abilities. After a night of meditation, Han Shua was in high spirits the next day. He left the Buzzed Merchant Guild with Phoebe and headed to the garden house where Leah Kane lived. During these days, the news that Han Shua was about to challenge the mad great swordmaster Leah Kane of the Brute Merchant Alliance had been deliberately exaggerated by Candide and Lawrence. Many spies of the nobles appeared in the vicinity of the garden house. There were also a few experts from all sides who were full of interest, waiting for Han Shua's arrival. When Han Shua alighted from Phoebe's carriage and walked alone to the garden house, he was recognized by someone. Amidst the whispers, the spies from all sides quickly returned to report the news. For a moment, the whispers turned into a hubbub. More and more people came to the garden house after hearing the news. As the mad great swordmaster of the Brute Merchant Alliance, Leah Kane was very famous in the circles of many nobles and experts. As soon as such a character appeared in Asen City, he successfully defeated 3 of the city's great swordmasters and made a name for himself. Unfortunately, Leah Kane was an outsider after all. The citizens of the Lancelot Empire naturally didn't like this. During this time, Han Shua's fame had also risen greatly. Of course, Han Shua's reputation wasn't good either. Since he had killed several opponents in a row, Han Shua's notoriety had spread far and wide. However, although Han Shua's reputation wasn't good, he was still a citizen of the Lancelot Empire. Therefore, everyone hoped that he would win. Along the way to the garden house, the nobles and commoners in the surroundings all cheered to send him off. These people had long known that such a day would come. Due to Lawrence's information, they knew that Han Shua would definitely come within the next 2 days. Since they had nothing better to do, they came to try their luck. They didn't expect that Han Shua would really come today. The spectators were all in high spirits. Han Shua, who was 1.9 meters tall, wore a simple and capable black warrior's attire. His appearance was masculine and handsome. Because he had been practicing demonic arts for a long time, he naturally had an eye-catching demonic temperament. Some of the noble ladies who saw Han Shuo for the first time had a favorable impression of him as soon as they saw his appearance, regardless of whether they were right or wrong. Each and every one of them looked at Han Shuo with burning gazes. At first, they whispered to each other, but later, they even started screaming. I'm so angry. He left for so many days, and this time he stood me up again. If I didn't know about this matter, who knows when I would be able to see him again. On a street in front of the garden house, Fanny was leading a group of people from the necromancy major of the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. She stared at Han Shuo from afar and complained in a low voice. Master Fanny, what are you saying? Look, that really is Brian. I thought it was fake when I first heard the news. I didn't think that it would really be Brian. He actually went to challenge that evil person, Leah Kane. Just thinking about it makes me excited. Amy of the necromancy major waved her little fist excitedly as she watched Han Shuo walk towards the garden house. She shouted at Fanny beside her. No, nothing. Fanny covered it up with a smile. She then said, I didn't think that this guy wouldn't be nervous at all in front of so many people. It looks like he's really grown up. Brian is really amazing. His deeds have spread all over Austin City. Even our necromancy major has many new students. These new students actually chose our weak necromancy major as soon as they entered the academy. What a reversal of fortune. Athena was also a bit excited. She sighed emotionally as she watched Han Shuo proudly walk forward. This time, Lisa had also come along. However, Lisa was much quieter than before. She didn't chatter incessantly, but only silently gazed at the dazzling Han Shuo in the distance. Looking at Han Shuo, who was still calm and unruffled in the face of so many gazes, Lisa suddenly felt that he was supposed to be this dazzling. I'm Brian. I've come to see Mr. Leah Kane, Han Shuo said with a smile to the guard in front of the garden house's main entrance. A large number of nobles and commoners had come to watch from the alleys and pavilions around the garden house. The news that Han Shuo wanted to challenge Leah Kane had been released a long time ago. Leah Kane had also given the order, so the guard naturally knew what to do. Mr. Leah Kane is currently cultivating. He already knew that you would come and told us to invite you in as soon as you arrived, the guard said respectfully. That's good. Please lead the way, Han Shuo said with a smile. Under the guard's guidance, Han Shuo walked into the garden house with him. The onlookers outside were all stopped. The garden house was a private property after all. Without the owner's permission, no one could enter without permission. Let us in. Let us in. Yes, we've been waiting for a long time. Please let us in. I'm Count ACI of the Lancelot Empire. I want to see Mr. Leah Kane. After Han Shuo entered, some of the commoners and nobles surrounding the garden house tried to use various methods to enter. Not far away, a few carriages slowly approached. These carriages were beautifully decorated. One look and anyone could tell that they were nobles. A group of nobles led by eldest Prince Charles, Old Han and Emily of the Betteridge family, ministers of finance Evie and Lawrence, Boris of the Northern Guard, and other nobles also slowly made their way over. Candide and one of the three heavyweights, Amies, appeared on top of the tallest building across from the garden house. They were also watching the garden house across from them. Chapter 286. That kid. Is he the Brian you were talking about? Amies, one of the three heavyweights of the Dark Mantle, looked at Han Shuo from the garden house with interest and spoke elegantly. That's him. He has indeed done many great things recently, and his strength seems to be unfathomable. It's just that I haven't truly seen him yet. This is a good opportunity to see his true strength, Candide said to Amies with a gloomy face. Amies looked to be in his 30s and was wearing a well-tailored white robe. There were no decorations on the robe, making it look clean and simple. It complemented his extraordinary handsome appearance and gave him an attractive and refined charm. However, for the nobles of the Lancelot Empire, the handsome and elegant Amies, who often wore a faint smile, was a terrifying character like the god of death. Once a noble was targeted by Ames, there was basically no possibility of escape. The lightest punishment was confiscation of their property and imprisonment, while the heaviest punishment was immediate execution. Among the three heavyweights, Cecilia was usually active abroad. Candide was in charge of gathering intelligence and investigating assassins of the Empire, and Ames was in charge of monitoring and suppressing high officials and nobles. The three of them had a clear division of labor and coordinated very well. However, Candide and Cecilia usually didn't show themselves in front of the public and posed no threat to some of the nobles of the Empire. Only Ames was the most familiar and also the most feared. There wasn't a single noble who wasn't afraid of him. You should be very clear about Leah Kane's strength. In addition, Leah Kane is related to First Prince Charles. If this kid can't beat Leah Kane, I'm afraid it will be difficult for him to leave the garden house alive. Ames narrowed his slender eyes and looked at Han Shua, who was standing proudly in the garden house as he spoke to Candide. Heh, that's hard to say. Ferguson, who is a light grand magus like you, also died in his hands. As far as I know, Ferguson's fame isn't any lower than Leah Kane's. If he can kill a light grand magus, then he might be able to kill Leah Kane as well. Although Candide wasn't optimistic about Han Shua had been promoted by him. Candide couldn't lose face in front of Ames. Ames smiled elegantly and didn't say much. He only nodded slightly and leisurely sat down on a stone bench on the high platform. He took out an exquisite tea set and began to drink by himself. Inside the garden house, Han Shua was a bit worried. Through the three demons spying, Han Shua discovered that Emily, Phoebe, and Fanny were all outside the garden house. Although the three women weren't in the same direction, Han Shua knew that they would definitely come looking for him once he left the garden house. Han Shua wasn't worried about Emily because she was open-minded when it came to relationships. Although she might have some grudges in her heart, at least she wouldn't fly into a rage. However, Phoebe and Fanny didn't know about Han Shua's situation. Once the two women saw each other, a storm would be inevitable. While Han Shua was still worrying about relationships, Mad Great Swordsman Leah Kane walked out from the center of the garden house. Leah Kane carried a broadsword and walked out with a cold expression. His cruel eyes swept over Han Shua and he snorted, "Brat, you're that Brian, right? That's me. I think you already know about the situation, so there's no need for us to talk nonsense. Let's fight on this spacious lawn and settle this storm, shall we?" As soon as Leah Kane walked out of the room, Han Shua immediately cast aside his emotional worries and focused all of his attention on Leah Kane, replying leisurely, "All right, I'll teach you a good lesson." Leah Kane laughed sinisterly and then looked at the crowd outside the garden house. He suddenly said, "If you don't mind, can you let the people outside come in and watch the fight?" Frowning, Han Shua thought for a moment and said, "I don't mind. It's just that there are too many people outside. If they all come in, I'm afraid it won't be appropriate." Then, there shouldn't be a problem if only the nobles are allowed in. Leah Kane had listened to Charles's instructions beforehand. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made this suggestion. Han Shua was worried that if the three women gathered together and got too close to him, there would be a disturbance that he didn't want to see. That was why he was a bit apprehensive. When Leah Kane said this, Han Shua remembered that Fanny and Phoebe didn't have noble titles. He nodded and said, "Then do as you wish." Seeing Han Shua nod in agreement, Leah Kane waved his hand at the guard in the distance. The guard seemed to have known Leah Kane's intentions and shouted from outside, "Those with noble titles in the Lancelot Empire can come in and watch. Other commoners are not allowed inside." With this, the nobles who were loitering outside walked in arrogantly and gracefully. The commoners around them didn't say anything. On the profound continent, the nobles had certain privileges. Commoners were well aware of this and had long since gotten used to it. Therefore, they weren't surprised. One by one, the nobles entered the garden house with their attendants. Among them, Phoebe and Lawrence mixed together and also took the opportunity to enter the garden house. As soon as Phoebe entered the garden house, she suddenly felt someone spying on her. She turned her head and saw that it was an astonished Emily. Emily was wearing a long purple dress. Her delicate face was as white as jade. She was incomparably beautiful among old Han's group, She carried an awe-inspiring and inviolable nobility. She didn't have any of the melancholy that a widow should have. She was unbelievably dazzling. Damn that Brian. This Emily must have also obtained a miraculous pill. Could he be related to Emily? With just a glance, Phoebe knew that it was the effect of the rebirth pill, especially when Emily looked at Phoebe with a gaze full of astonishment. The two women immediately understood what was going on with just a glance. Hey, Brian, you'll definitely win. Lawrence was very optimistic as he cheered for Han Shuo from afar. Humph, he wants to win with his abilities? Dream on. First Prince Charles said disdainfully from not too far away from Lawrence. The group of nobles following behind him immediately chimed in and started sucking up to the prince. Each and every one of them did their utmost to recite the reasons why Han Shuo would surely lose, wanting to win Charles's favor. There was a lawn the size of a football field in the center of the garden house. Han Shuo and Leah Kane were currently at the center of the lawn, surrounded by nobles of the Lancelot Empire. These nobles all had expert guards beside them. In addition, they were quite a distance away from Han Shuo and Leah Kane, so they weren't worried about their own safety. The grave and stern Leah Kane didn't pay too much attention to Han Shuo. When he saw the nobles enter one after another, he cast his gaze at Charles. Charles, who was chatting cheerfully and wittily, saw Leah Kane look at him. He nodded slightly, indicating that Leah Kane could make his move. Leah Kane, who was carrying a broadsword, finally turned his gaze back to Han Shuo. He said coldly, "Brat, are you ready to die?" Han Shuo took a deep breath and expelled all distracting thoughts from his mind. Han Shuo's face instantly became cold and merciless. His voice was also cold and arrogant. "Mr. Leah Kane, before the battle, I have to remind you that apart from martial arts, I'm also an archmage necromancer. I hope you'll be careful." "Humph. You're just a useless archmage necromancer. You're wasting your energy on this kind of useless magic. I can already imagine how high your attainments in martial arts are. I really don't know what kind of trash that great swordmaster you killed was. He couldn't even win against a guy like you who didn't focus on martial arts. It seems that your Lancelot Empire really doesn't have any true experts." Leah Kane was incomparably arrogant. He had offended all the surrounding nobles with just this one sentence. Even the nobles who had bet on him to win all revealed angry expressions. "Idiot, even if you win, don't even think about establishing a foothold in the Lancelot Empire. No wonder you wanted to escape from the brute merchant alliance. With this kind of temper, if you didn't have some strength, you would have been killed long ago." First Prince Charles looked at the arrogant Leah Kane and cursed in his heart. He had already made up his mind that even if Leah Kane killed Han Shuo this time, he absolutely couldn't expose his relationship with Leah Kane. This was to avoid affecting the noble's opinion of him because of Leah Kane. "Mr. Leah Kane, I hope you won't disappoint me." With a thought, the Demon's Lair edge fell into Han Shuo's right hand from his sleeve. The 2-foot-long Demon's Lair edge was as sharp as a needle. The blade was an abnormal dark brown color. It didn't look very conspicuous without magical yuan. "Kid, since you dared to come to my place, you should have already made preparations. Today, I'll let you know the strength of your seniors. Don't think that you're invincible just because you've won against a few pieces of trash." Leah Kane snorted coldly and pointed the broadsword in his hand at Han Shuo, speaking arrogantly. Han Shuo didn't respond to Leah Kane. With a callous expression, he raised the Demon's Lair edge and directly flew towards Leah Kane. His body drew several afterimages due to his high speed. He was so fast that it was hard to tell which was which. Chapter 287. Although Leah Kane's words were disdainful, when Han Shuo actually made his move, he immediately focused all of his attention to deal with it. He raised the broadsword in his hand and snorted coldly. A silver sword curtain suddenly opened in front of him. Leah Kane had already advanced to the realm of Great Swordmaster many years ago. He had immersed himself in this realm for a long time, challenging many experts in the Brute Merchant Alliance and earning the title of Mad Great Swordmaster. If he hadn't defended the lightning sacred Magus Reynoldila of the Brute Merchant Alliance, Leah Kane wouldn't have come to the Lancelot Empire. Great Swordmaster Leah Kane opened the silver sword curtain and completely enveloped the area in front of him. Han Shuo, who was flying over, could feel the enormous sword aura contained within the sword curtain. The invincible Demon's Lair edge in his hand shot out a black light after injecting demonic yuan into it, directly piercing towards the silver sword curtain. When the Demon's Lair edge shot out this attack, the black light that burst out was dark and gloomy. It carried an astonishing killing intent as it suddenly bombarded the sword screen that Leah Kane had created. Only a few explosive sounds could be heard as the silver sword screen and the black light intertwined. The silver light and black light scattered like specks of starlight. "Oh!" Leah Kane exclaimed softly and abruptly took a step back. He looked at Han Shuo in astonishment and said, "Good kid, your martial technique is indeed a bit strange. It's actually not fighting aura." The silver sword curtain disappeared into thin air under the black light of the Demon's Lair edge. However, when the silver sword curtain and the Demon's Lair edge collided, an enormous force flowed through the Demon's Lair edge and directly into Han Shuo's arm. Han Shuo's arm was shaken to the point of numbness. Han Shuo didn't rush to attack again. He coldly stared at Leah Kane, not daring to relax at all. After this attack, Han Shuo already knew that Leah Kane was indeed much stronger than the great swordmaster he had killed last time. They were both great swordmasters, but Leah Kane had immersed himself in this realm for many years. His attainments were indeed extraordinary. This Brian does have some strength. On the balcony opposite the garden house, Amis looked at Candide in astonishment and exclaimed softly. Candide's eyes sparkled as he looked at Brian with great interest. He replied, "This is also the first time I've seen him fight. He didn't have any fighting aura, but he was actually able to break through Leah Kane's sword curtain condensed from fighting aura. This is indeed strange. It looks like he's hiding a lot of secrets." The nobles around the lawn cried out in surprise when they saw Han Shuo cut through Leah Kane's sword curtain with a single stroke. Lawrence, Phoebe, and the others revealed joyful expressions. "This kid isn't bad. He saved us last time at Evie's house, so we owe him a favor. I hope he won't be harmed by Leah Kane." Old Han, who was beside Emily, chuckled as he looked at Han Shuo and spoke to Emily. "Father, I think this Brian might be able to win," Emily said with a light smile. She understood that Han Shuo's strength wasn't just limited to this. Just Han Shuo's ability to fly was already a great advantage. This wasn't something Leah Kane could do. "Haha, I hope so." Old Han laughed heartily. Leah Kane snorted coldly amidst the clamor of the crowd. "You do have some strength, but it's a pity that you shouldn't have challenged me." As soon as he finished speaking, Leah Kane raised his broadsword and walked towards Han Shuo. His speed wasn't fast, and every step he took was very heavy. The two crisscrossing scars on his neck looked very sinister, and his eyes were filled with a crazy desire to fight. Leah Kane walked over step by step, his aura becoming stronger and stronger. The broadsword in his hand shone with a brilliant silver light, emitting a dazzling radiance under the sunlight. The silver fighting aura and the broadsword fused together and converged into a gorgeous rainbow. It slashed down towards Han Shuo from a distance of 10 meters. This silver rainbow was incomparably fast, as if it had crossed 10 meters. It appeared in front of Han Shuo in an instant. The enormous power contained within it was so strong that even some of the spectating nobles could clearly feel it. Han Shuo stood there like a fool. He didn't seem to be able to react for a moment under the attack of the silver rainbow. The crowd watched helplessly as Han Shuo was slashed down by the silver rainbow. He didn't seem to know how to dodge at all. "Hurry and run." Many of the spectators who were worried about Han Shuo all screamed out to warn him. Unfortunately, the speed of their voices was obviously slower than Leah Kane's silver rainbow. As soon as these people's warnings came out, a terrifying explosion came from the area where Han Shuo had been standing. The area where Han Shuo had been standing had directly split open into a 15-meter-long ravine. The ravine was so deep that it looked like it had been cut into a piece of tofu. Silver fighting aura lingered in the ravine and didn't dissipate. The enormous power continued to explode on both sides of the huge ravine, producing rumbling sounds. When the terrifying explosions stopped, the ravine that had been split open became even bigger. All the weeds were covered by the silver fighting aura and turned into green sawdust. What a terrifying attack. Poor challenger. He's definitely done for. Sigh. He's still a bit young after all. It's inevitable that he can't withstand a single blow from such an expert who's been famous for so many years. Let's go. That young man must have died in the ravine. There's nothing left to see. Oh, such a handsome man was actually killed by that ugly monster. Damn enemy nations people. All sorts of unfavorable comments about Han Shuo came from the mouths of the spectators. They watched as Han Shuo didn't make any movements to dodge Liu Kang's sword. They naturally assumed that Han Shuo had already died in the ravine. Suddenly, a loud shout sounded. "Oh my God! Look up in the sky!" As soon as these words were spoken, everyone raised their heads in unison. They saw Han Shuo proudly standing high in the sky with the Demon's Lair edge in hand, coldly looking down at Liu Kang. He wasn't injured at all. How is this possible? Even Liu Kang himself couldn't help but cry out in surprise. He stared at the sky with some disbelief. If a swordsman wanted to stand in the sky, they had to reach the realm of Sword God in order to rely on fighting aura to travel in the sky. Although mages could use the levitation spell to stand in the air at the Archmage realm, the levitation spell still couldn't be that fast, nor could it be that nimble. Although Han Shuo was an Archmage necromancer, he couldn't use the slow levitation spell to dodge the swift and violent sword attack. Therefore, Liu Kang couldn't help but be shocked when he saw Han Shuo standing unscathed in the sky. Amies, can you sense the gathering of magical elements on his body? Why can't I sense it at all? Candide, who was on the high platform, looked at Han Shuo who was standing proudly in the sky and shouted in amazement. Shaking his head, the usually calm and collected Amies also cried out in surprise, "Strange, very strange. He's not using any magical fighting aura, but he's actually able to stand so miraculously in the sky. What's going on?" It looks like it must have something to do with the miraculous martial arts technique he practices. Amies, Brian's martial arts technique is very miraculous. If the Lancelot Empire's military can master it and use it to fly at high speeds, the strength of our Lancelot Empire's army will increase many times over. Candide's heart was moved as he immediately shouted, "Be careful. If Liu Kang dares to kill, we must stop him even if it means breaking the rules. This Brian is indeed miraculous. He's too useful to our Lancelot Empire. We absolutely cannot let him die." Amies shouted resolutely. He had already decided to protect Han Shuo at all costs. "Let's do it. After this matter, I believe that your majesty will know what to do." Candide immediately agreed. His sinister eyes focused on Liu Kang's body. The dark element around his body intensified as he prepared to make a move at any time, regardless of his status. Amidst the lush foliage of a towering tree, the super assassin Balins that Han Shuo and Lawrence had previously met in the northern rose garden was crouching amidst the leaves and gazing at the sky. His eyes were wide open as he muttered to himself, "This is too miraculous. He's actually using a martial arts technique to stand proudly in the sky. This Brian seems to be hiding other secrets besides his extraordinary attainments in killing aura. Master really made the right choice to let me come this time. Kid, don't think that you're so great just because you're a mage. Come down if you have the guts." Liu Kang bellowed as he looked up at Han Shuo in the sky. Although he was a great swordmaster, he still couldn't fly in the sky. Facing Han Shuo, he could only stare at him helplessly. "As you wish." Han Shuo let out a long laugh in the sky and flew down like a meteor. The Demon's Lair edge in his hand shot out a 2-meter-long purplish-red demonic light. A thick, murderous aura spread in all directions with Han Shuo as the center. All the onlookers felt their hearts palpitate and couldn't help but step back a bit. Each and every one of them looked at the descending Han Shuo with shock. Chapter 288. Good kid. Leah Kane clearly felt this enormous killing intent. His crazed eyes were filled with battle excitement as silver fighting aura continuously condensed on the broadsword in his hand. He didn't wait for Han Shuo to land on the ground before another silver rainbow shot out, aiming straight for Han Shuo, who was slashing at his head. Han Shuo's eyes turned scarlet red as killing intent gathered around his body. His expression was sinister and terrifying, and a sinister, mysterious, and terrifying aura shrouded Leah Kane's head along with the bloody mist. The 2-meter-long purplish-red demonic light drifted downwards in a bewitching manner like a beautiful large feather drifting in the wind. A loud clang sounded as the purplish-red demonic light descended and intertwined with Leah Kane's silver rainbow. It was as if there were beautiful fireworks exploding in the air. Silver, deep red, and purple lights continuously shot out. Waves of metallic clashing sounds continuously came from the beautiful explosions. Leah Kane, who was standing on the ground, had already been smashed into the grass by the enormous force as the explosions continued to ring in his ears. The soil had sunk up to his knees, and a strange power of alternating heat and cold suddenly enveloped him. The strange power was like an all-pervasive ghost that poured straight into his body. Leah Kane suddenly shivered as he felt his body turn stiff and cold. Just as he was feeling aghast, another wave of scorching heat erupted from his body like a volcano. The two auras of cold and heat intertwined within his body, giving Leah Kane an incomparably wonderful and painful feeling. Ah! Leah Kane let out a crazed howl and screamed at the sky like a madman. He tore off the clothes on the upper half of his body, revealing a body of strong muscles. Streaks of silver light were clearly twisting on his naked body, and there were even streaks of red and purple light reflecting off of them. It was a very strange sight. "I'm going to tear you apart," Leah Kane roared. Specks of silver light gathered on the broadsword in his hand as he brandished it towards the cold attacking Han Shuo. Suddenly, the light on the broadsword in Leah Kane's hand abruptly receded. All of the silver fighting aura had disappeared, and the bright and clean broadsword didn't reflect any luster under the sunlight. It looked incomparably strange. Han Shuo, who had exchanged a blow with Leah Kane, understood that Leah Kane's strength was indeed extraordinary. Han Shuo, who was in the bloodthirsty realm, hadn't been able to gain the upper hand even with his full strength. If it wasn't for the mystical glacial spellfire's two extreme cold and heat attributes, Leah Kane wouldn't have been in such a difficult situation. Han Shuo's hands were numb as he flew down. An enormous amount of magical yuan surged into the demon's lair edge. Han Shuo, who had been accumulating energy to deal another heavy blow to Elijah Kane, suddenly discovered that the radiance of the broadsword had completely disappeared. He instinctively felt a sense of danger. Han Shuo's extraordinary perception once again displayed its keen effect. He was flying down to attack Leah Kane when he immediately connected with the three demons. When the broadsword in Leah Kane's hand trembled, Han Shuo's body suddenly split into four and fell in four different directions. At this moment, the broadsword that had completely lost its luster suddenly burst out with a blinding light. Fine, needle-like rays of cold light shot towards the sky like rain. Those needle-like rays of cold light covered an area of 5 meters. Not only were they densely packed, but they were also filled with terrifying penetrative power. They pierced into the sky in the blink of an eye and disappeared. The body formed by the Een demon took the place of the original body and was completely penetrated by the cold light. The incorporeal and formless Een demon was also invaded by a strange power when the cold light pierced through the sky. Because the dense fighting aura had been condensed to an extremely small degree, it actually possessed a powerful destructive power against the Een demon. This caused one of Han Shuo's Een demons to be pierced full of holes and its aura to become extremely weak. What a terrifying attack! Han Shuo was shocked. He was absolutely horrified when he landed on the ground. Leah Kane was indeed very frightening. He was actually able to condense fighting aura to such a small and dense degree. The fighting aura had been condensed to the size of needles, but the power and destructive power contained within had actually increased by 100 times. Even the almost incorporeal demon was injured by this kind of sharp light. Han Shuo believed that if he hadn't reacted in time and decisively used fulgurating shadows, his physical body would definitely have been destroyed. While Han Shuo was endlessly shocked by Liu Kane, as the attacker, was even more incredulous. He never thought that Han Shuo would be able to dodge his attack. When Han Shuo, who had been split into four, landed on the ground, the three demons' bodies slowly faded, like reflections in water that had a stone thrown into them. They twisted and swayed for a moment before disappearing, leaving only Han Shuo standing behind Liu Kane. Too strong. Wow, what was that just now? A rain of swords, too gorgeous. I didn't think that this ugly guy could have such a beautiful attack. This Brian is the real deal. If my eyes weren't playing tricks on me, I would have seen 4 Brians just now. Oh my god, too amazing. You're not playing tricks on you. I also saw 4 Brians. What kind of martial technique is that? It's too powerful. After a moment of silence, the surroundings suddenly burst into a fierce clamor. All the nobles and their guards who had come to watch the fight started discussing in surprise. Their faces were filled with excitement and astonishment. They were shocked by this unprecedentedly exciting fight. Wow, what's going on? On the high platform, Candide had an expression of disbelief as he looked at Liu Kane and Han Shuo who were standing in the distance. That Liu Kane is really terrifying. According to our Dark Mantle's information, the experts he's fought in recent years have only used a silver rainbow-like swordlight to directly defeat his opponents with his superior fighting aura. However, it seems like Liu Kane's true ultimate move should be that fine and dense rain of cold light that he just released. I could feel the terrifying attack power contained within. I didn't think that this Liu Kane, who looks so crude and brainless, would actually be hiding such a sinister and meticulous ultimate move. What a terrifying person! Amis exclaimed. After a pause, Amis excitedly shouted, Candide! However, this Brian of yours is even more amazing. Facing that kind of attack that was almost impossible to dodge, he actually used that miraculous martial technique to split into 4 people and successfully escape. What an amazing kid! Of course, otherwise why would I put in so much effort for him? Candide, who was originally secretly amazed, immediately said in a gloomy and proud voice after hearing Ami's words. The surrounding people were discussing spiritedly and clamoring noises rose and fell. It seemed like the excited spectators wouldn't stop until the 2 of them made their move. After experiencing a fierce battle, Liu Kane and Han Shuo both had a clear understanding of each other's strength. Han Shuo, who was originally full of confidence, began to treat Han Shuo seriously. Liu Kane, who was originally disdainful of Han Shuo, also put away his arrogance and treated Han Shuo as the most terrifying enemy in his life. At this moment, the 2 of them were 15 meters apart, facing each other with equal harshness. Liu Kane once again stood on flat ground, lightly panting as he glared at Han Shuo. The 2 of them just stared at each other without saying a word. After 10 breaths, Han Shuo grinned and said, Liu Kane, you will die today without a doubt. Your attack just now was indeed incomparably powerful, but it's a pity that it requires a certain amount of time to condense and consumes a lot of fighting aura, right? Liu Kane immediately turned pale with fright when he heard these words. It seemed that Han Shuo had clearly pointed out the weakness of that move. At this moment, Han Shuo dashed towards Liu Kane like a bolt of lightning. The Demon's Lair edge was a step ahead of him and bit towards Liu Kane like a spirit snake with its fangs bared. Once Liu Kane's greatsword blocked the Demon's Lair edge would change direction and continue attacking him from the other side. Han Shuo didn't attack Liu Kane like the Demon's Lair edge did. Instead, he flew into the sky once again and took out a white bone staff unhurriedly, starting to chant a necromancy incantation. When the canopy of necromancy covered the sun, 2 evil knights led a group of dark creatures onto the lawn, surrounding Liu Kane heavily. 2 evil knights, 5 hate knights, 20 zombies, 70 skeletal warriors, and 2 teams of 30 gargoyles continuously appeared with Han Shuo's incantations. Liu Kane, who was entangled by the demon's lair edge, couldn't do anything. He could only watch as the enormous dark creatures drowned him. Leah Kane is finished, Amis said elegantly and smiled at Candide. Let's go. We'll go see His Majesty together. This Brian's value will definitely make His Majesty make the right decision. Hee hee, that kid Lawrence's luck isn't bad. Perhaps we should get closer to him. You're right. Candide nodded in agreement and floated into the sky with Amis, heading towards the palace from the other side. The two hadn't even completely left when Leah Kane's miserable howls rang out continuously and spread throughout the entire garden house. Leah Kane's ankle was grabbed by the Earth Elite zombie hidden in the ground. He was then ambushed by an unremarkable 7-winged little skull and was seriously injured. Afterwards, he was trampled to death by 2 evil knights charging towards him. Behind him, more than 100 dark creatures swarmed over and tore Leah Kane to pieces. Chapter 289. Leah Kane's fate was sealed the moment the 100 or so dark creatures appeared. After all, Leah Kane had already used up a lot of fighting aura in his battle with Han Shuo. That subtle cold light attack in particular had consumed a lot of fighting aura. Although Han Shuo, who had the mental strength of a Grand Magus, couldn't release Grand Magus necromancy magic, his enormous mental strength was enough for Han Shuo to summon a large number of dark creatures. Especially among these dark creatures, there were the ridiculously strong Little Skull, Earth Elite Zombie, and Wood Elite Zombie. These 3 strange dark creatures were mixed in with the enormous army of necromancers. Their surprise attacks weren't something an ordinary person could defend against. Leah Kane had to deal with the Demon's Lair Edge's all-pervasive attacks while facing the 2 evil knights who were famous for their tyrannical strength. Naturally, he had to divert most of his attention. In this way, the 3 strange creatures' special attack method was naturally effective. Leah Kane was instantly injured by Little Skull's sneak attack and then trampled to death by the evil knights. More than 100 dark creatures submerged Leah Kane in an instant. The surrounding nobles and attendants were blocked by the dark creatures and couldn't clearly see what was happening. They could only hear Leah Kane's mournful screams. When Leah Kane's mournful screams gradually subsided, Han Shuo, who was standing proudly in the air, slowly chanted an incantation and sent all the summoned creatures back to the other dimension. When the dark creatures had dispersed, there wasn't even bone residue left in the center of the lawn, apart from blood. Everyone understood that Leah Kane was done for. He must have been torn apart and eaten by the dark creatures. The large amount of undried blood on the ground was proof of this fact. He's done for. Leah Kane is dead. He should be dead. Oh, how is this possible? He was killed so quickly. The onlookers looked at Han Shuo, who was standing proudly in the air, and then looked at the bloodstains on the lawn. They all knew that the battle was over. Han Shuo had successfully killed the mad great swordmaster of the Brute Merchant Alliance, Leah Kane. Han Shuo had won this battle fair and square. He had displayed a miraculous martial skill from start to finish. In the end, he had used the most effective human wave tactic used by necromancers to drown a great swordmaster. This battle could be called a classic no matter how one looked at it. Especially Leah Kane's cold drizzle attack and Han Shuo's miraculous martial skill of splitting himself into 4. They were deeply imprinted in their memories. Amidst the hubbub of discussion below, Han Shuo stood proudly in the air, whistling towards the sky as he soared into the distance. He elegantly and confidently disappeared into a black, until no one could see a trace of him anymore. Not only did the onlookers in the garden house know of Han Shuo's great victory, even the commoners on the streets around the garden house knew that Han Shuo had won after seeing Han Shuo fly away. They all cheered loudly, as if they were celebrating a festival. First Prince Charles's face was frighteningly gloomy. No matter how he guessed, he never thought that Leah Kane would lose. This was simply unrealistic for him. The great merchant Cameron's expression was even more unsightly than Charles's. Standing behind Charles, Cameron's face was ashen. His gaze was lifeless as he stared blankly, completely at a loss as to what to do. As the operator behind the scenes of this wagered fight, Cameron had also bet his hard-earned capital. Just Fanny's buzzed merchant guild alone would cost Cameron his hard-earned capital. In contrast to him was Phoebe. The originally cold and arrogant Phoebe's face was now filled with uncontrollable excitement. Her small cherry mouth couldn't help but mutter to herself, I'm rich, I'm rich. Heh, Brian. Oh, Brian, you really didn't disappoint me. Lawrence looked at Charles's gloomy expression and felt that he had never felt so carefree before. He laughed heartily and swaggered away from Charles and Cameron with Phoebe. Let's go, father. Although Emily already knew that this would happen, as the woman behind Han Shuo, she still felt endlessly honored when she saw Han Shuo display his invincible might. The corners of her mouth curved into a happy arc as she said to old Han with a smile, Inconceivable, an inconceivable kid. Old Han exclaimed in admiration as he walked out of the garden house with Emily. One by one, the officials and nobles walked out of the garden house. The details of Han Shuo's great victory over Leah Kane were quickly spread. For a time, the entire Asen city was talking about his elegant demeanor. Who knew how many noble ladies secretly regarded Han Shuo as an object of admiration? Who knew how many nobles wanted to recruit Han Shuo? Asen City, inside the imperial palace. Amis and Candide, who had left earlier, were in the same room as His Majesty the King of Lancelot Empire. Candide and Amis were softly narrating the course of events to the king. After a long while, King Uhtred of Lancelot Empire suddenly shouted in a carefree manner, Good, well done. I heard yesterday that he found the manufacturing blueprints. Today, he killed Leah Kane of the Brute Merchant Alliance. This kid is indeed worthy of my capital. Your Majesty, that's not all. Brian has grasped a mystical martial technique that is even more frightening. Not only can Brian become a top expert himself, if his martial technique can be popularized, it will have an immeasurable impact on the Lancelot Empire. Amis immediately added with a serious expression after Uhtred finished speaking. Uhtred was shocked when he heard these words. He asked in astonishment, What's going on? It's like this. Candide, one of the three heavyweights of the Dark Mantle, began to explain in detail to Uhtred with a gloomy face. He narrated the details of Han Shuo's defeat of Leah Kane in detail. Candide then added, Your Majesty, Brian has a clean background and is loyal and devoted to the Lancelot Empire. For such a person, it is worth it no matter what price Your Majesty has to pay. Being able to become the king of the Lancelot Empire, Uhtred's knowledge and experience were naturally extraordinary. After Candide finished narrating Han Shuo's miracles, Uhtred's eyes shone with brilliance. After a moment of silence, Uhtred instructed, Candide, I bestow the title of Count to Brian, a mansion in the northern part of the city, 10,000 gold coins, and a direct promotion from Dark Moon Emissary to Dark Sun Emissary. He has the right to investigate any information about the Dark Mantle. In addition, you will personally find Brian and let him choose an empty territory. For the time being, don't ask him about the martial technique. We must first let him feel our sincerity. Your Majesty is wise. I believe that Brian will definitely be endlessly grateful. Candide flattered. Yes, Candide. This Brian was single-handedly promoted by you. Your contributions are also not small. I bestow you a medal of bravery as a reward. Uhtred said to Candide with a faint smile. Many thanks, Your Majesty. Your subject is endlessly grateful. Candide was overjoyed and immediately kowtowed in gratitude. The Lancelot Empire's Medal of Bravery had a special meaning. Only those who had made outstanding contributions to the Lancelot Empire could receive a Medal of Bravery. With this Medal of Bravery, it meant that Candide would enjoy the privileges of the Lancelot Empire for life. Even if the current king passed away, any prince who succeeded the throne could not use force against the Empire's meritorious subjects with the Medal of Bravery. In addition, the Medal of Bravery could be inherited. Even if Candide passed away, his immediate family members would similarly enjoy the privileges. Although the Medal of Bravery didn't have any real rights, this small medal was a proof of privilege. It was much more precious than an ordinary noble title. Therefore, even Candide was overjoyed when he heard that Uhtred had bestowed him the Medal of Bravery. He inwardly thought that this Brian was really his lucky star. Congratulations, Candide. Ames, one of the three heavyweights of the Dark Mantle, gracefully turned around and congratulated Candide. Many thanks, Candide replied with a smile. His face was filled with unconcealable joy. All right, this is what you deserve. Because of your discovery, the Lancelot Empire may obtain a Sacred Swordmaster or Sacred Magus. I hope that you can better guide Brian and make even more contributions to the Lancelot Empire. Uhtred looked at Candide with a smile and slowly said, Rest assured, Your Majesty, I will help Brian quickly adapt to the life of a noble in the Empire. This kid's perception is very high. Sooner or later, he will become a pillar of the Empire. Candide immediately guaranteed in his joy after receiving the Medal of Bravery. Nodding his head, Uhtred smiled and said, All right, you guys can withdraw first. I will warn the Church of Light that they will not be allowed to act presumptuously in our Lancelot Empire. Hee, I believe that the title of Count is only the beginning for that kid. I hope he won't disappoint me. Candide and Ames glanced at each other and didn't say anything else. They respectfully bowed and withdrew, directly returning to the Dark Mantle headquarters at Mt. Ordas behind the Imperial Palace through the secret tunnel. Candide would start preparing the matter of Han Shua's noble title. Chapter 290. In just a few days, Han Shua's name had spread throughout Asen City. Due to Han Shua's identity as an Archmage Necromancer, as well as his killing of Leah Kane, he had proven his strength. Uhtred used the excuse of him finding the blueprint to confer the title of Earl on Han Shua. There was a magnificent mansion in the north of the city, with guards, maids, servants, and housekeepers. There were more than 100 rooms of various sizes. This was directly bestowed upon Han Shua by Uhtred. Although the title of Earl hadn't been officially bestowed upon him, it still couldn't stop the admiration and deliberate befriending of Han Shua. From the day Han Shua left the garden house, this magnificent mansion had officially belonged to Han Shua. In the past few days, many high officials and nobles came to visit. Unfortunately, the housekeeper kept saying that the master hadn't moved in yet, so all the visitors could only leave their gifts behind. Han Shua, who was the center of attention, didn't know what was going on outside. After leaving the garden house, he flew alone to the mountain behind the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. He directly activated the transportation matrix at the entrance of the mountain and returned to the Cemetery of Death. After the battle with Leah Kane, Han Shua felt that he had benefited greatly. He slowly comprehended what he had learned from the battle, slowly recovering his magical yuan and mental strength. After spending an entire night's time, Han Shua's physical strength had reached its peak. He immersed himself in the bloodlust realm, his eyes bloodshot as he continuously circulated his magical yuan. Just like this, a few more days passed. Han Shua's crimson eyes gradually returned to normal. He lightly sighed. I'm only one step away. Unfortunately, this step is like a bottleneck. I can't break through. I really don't know what's going on. Han Shua could faintly feel that he was about to break through to the bloodlust realm. Unfortunately, no matter how hard Han Shua tried, he couldn't smoothly break through to this realm. Breaking through in demonic magic required opportunity and comprehension. Perhaps after 1 or 2 days of comprehension, Han Shua would be able to directly break through to the next realm. Once he grasped this one step, he would be able to immediately advance. Blindly wasting his energy on cultivation wasn't a good idea. When Han Shua felt that he couldn't rely on bitter cultivation to advance, he couldn't help but temporarily give up on practicing demonic magic. After thinking for a moment, Han Shua took out the skeletal staff with 3 skulls of 3 different colors. Now, Han Shua was certain that this skeletal staff was transformed from the Eye of Darkness. This was because the handle of the staff had the aura of the Eye of Darkness. When Han Shua used the skeletal staff to gather mental strength to cast spells, he could successfully open the Cemetery of Death. Compared to the white bone staff he'd obtained from the Calamity Church, this skeletal staff appeared to be much more exquisite and ancient. The three different skulls seemed to contain three different kinds of power. When Han Shuo held the skeletal staff in his hand, he could faintly sense a little bit of it. Without a doubt, this skeletal staff was definitely a treasure that belonged to the Cemetery of Death. Holding the skeletal staff and shaking it, Han Shuo murmured, "Let's try this skeletal staff." Fallen undead warriors, answer the call of the Dark Emissary and reveal your existence. An ordinary skeletal summoning spell was chanted by Han Shuo as he waved the skeletal staff. His mental strength poured into the skeletal staff, and the three skulls on the staff suddenly lit up. Then, a row of 16 skeletal warriors appeared out of thin air. Han Shuo was greatly shocked as he looked at the 16 skeletal warriors that had appeared out of thin air. With Han Shuo's grand Magus-level mental strength, he could only summon 8 skeletal warriors when he used the white bone staff to summon skeletal warriors. However, when he used the bone staff, he'd actually reached the highest level of summoning skeletal warriors, level 5. The number of skeletal warriors had directly doubled. This is too miraculous. Han Shuo couldn't help but exclaim. Then, he started chanting the Evil Knight summoning spell. When he finished chanting, 2 evil knights appeared out of thin air. Multiplied. Han Shuo was overjoyed. He then tried summoning the hate warriors and zombie warriors, but the results were the same. With the skeletal staff in hand, Han Shuo only needed to use the skeletal staff as a medium to chant spells, and the number of creatures he could summon doubled. After this experiment was successful, Han Shuo impatiently chanted another incantation, casting the Canopy of Necromancy and Acid Bog. In the end, Han Shuo discovered that both the Canopy of Necromancy and Acid Bog covered an area that was twice as wide as before. Good stuff. This really is good stuff. Caressing the skeletal staff, Han Shuo couldn't bear to part with it. He hadn't thought that this skeletal staff would be so miraculous. It could actually double the power of all necromancy magic, allowing Han Shuo's strength to increase once again. The skeletal staff had a peculiar appearance and seemed to be quite old. Apart from doubling the power of necromancy magic, Han Shuo faintly felt that there were other secrets hidden within the skeletal staff. Unfortunately, apart from using the skeletal staff to cast necromancy magic, Han Shuo couldn't find any other way to test it. A streak of white light flashed, and Emily's figure appeared in the transportation matrix at the center of the Cemetery of Death. Emily saw Han Shuo as soon as she appeared, and immediately said, "I knew you should be here." The transportation matrix that connected to this place was in a crevice in the Cemetery of Death. Normally, Han Shuo would travel to the Cemetery of Death from that secret location in the back mountains of the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. Only Emily knew about this habit. Therefore, when Emily arrived there and saw the magic wands neatly arranged in the corner of the cemetery, she knew that Han Shuo was definitely in the Cemetery of Death. Why have you come?" Han Shuo smiled when he saw Emily appear, and immediately pulled Emily into his arms. "You should hurry back to Asen City. His Majesty the King has prepared the title of Count for you. Everything has been taken care of, and we're just waiting for you to return to Asen City to be conferred the title of Count for you. Who knew that you would disappear for several days, and even the Dark Mantle couldn't find any news about you. Lord Candide is burning with anxiety and asked me to help him find a way to contact you. I guess that you should be in the Cemetery of Death, and it looks like I've found the right person." Emily rolled her eyes at Han Shuo and explained, "So it's like that." Han Shuo responded, then chuckled and asked, "Then, His Majesty the King is preparing to confer the title of Count on me?" "That's right. Apart from the title of Count, there's also a mansion in the northern part of the city and 1,000 gold coins. In addition, Candide seems to have even asked about the matters of your territory and is just waiting for you to take it over." Emily said, "Very good. I didn't think that the battle with Leah Kane would give me such great benefits. Heh. It looks like the title of nobility isn't that hard to obtain after all," Han Shuo said with a smile, then stood in the transportation matrix with Emily. They activated the transportation matrix and directly returned to Asen City. Mount Ordas, Dark Mantle Headquarters. "Stinking brat. Why did you disappear for 10 days? Candide immediately scolded when he saw Han Shuo appear. I suffered some minor injuries after the battle with Leah Kane. I had no choice but to hide and recuperate. That's why I was a bit late. Han Shua lied, then looked at Candide with a smile and congratulated him. Congratulations, Lord Candide. I heard that His Majesty the King awarded you a Medal of Bravery 2 days ago. Heh, congratulations. When Han Shua said this, Candide's gloomy face also revealed a bit of a smile. However, Candide quickly recovered and said with a straight face, all right, let's not talk about this for now. Give me your Dark Mantle Iron Medallion. His Majesty has directly ordered you to advance to the rank of a Dark Sun Emissary. Your luck is really too good. Let's go. Come with me to see His Majesty. Let His Majesty award you a noble title and bestow you with the territory you deserve. Candide said this and brought Han Shua directly to the Imperial Palace through the secret transportation matrix in the Dark Mantle headquarters. Not long after, King Uhtred summoned all the nobles of Asen City to see Han Shua in the vast Imperial Palace of the Lancelot Empire. Uhtred, who was sitting sideways on the throne, looked at Han Shua below and began to announce in a ceremonial manner, Brian, for repeatedly helping the Lancelot Empire defend against foreign enemies. I bestow upon you the title of Count, a mansion in the northern part of the city, and 10,000 gold coins. I hope that you will continue to work hard and make even greater contributions to the empire. Many thanks to your Majesty. Han Shua, who had long since been warned by Candide, sincerely expressed his thanks. Yes, the easternmost Bretel city of the empire will be your territory. This Bretel city occupies an enormous area, but it's also full of chaos. I hope that under your leadership, it will be restored to its rightful order. Uhtred raised his voice. When they heard that it was Bretel City, the nobles who were listening all revealed flabbergasted expressions, as if this Bretel City was very famous. Thank you, Your Majesty. I will definitely take a good look at Bretel City and restore it to the Empire's rightful order. Han Shua replied respectfully, all right, that's all for today. Everyone is dismissed. Uhtred looked at Han Shua a few more times, then waved his hand to indicate that the court meeting was over. Everyone left one after another. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.